Hey everyone, per your requests, I'm starting Sword of Coming. Chapters 491 through 500 of the previous episode. Chen Ping'an arrives in the capital of Southern Garden Nation and settles into a temporary room in Champion Scholar Alley, where he befriends a young boy named Chao Qinglang. Their bond deepens as Chen imparts wisdom on empathy and character, while his own martial arts practice intensifies. Meanwhile, Chen uncovers a sinister plot by local elite cultivators and a demonic force to manipulate the fortress's fortune and nurture a ghost infant. Navigating this dangerous web, he suppresses the demonic threat, saving the fortress from certain destruction. His actions, marked by a mix of ruthless decisiveness and unwavering moral integrity, earn him the grudging respect of local power players. As Chen continues his journey northward toward the Sword Qi Great Wall, he experiences a series of harrowing encounters. He faces off against powerful elites, including the formidable Ding Ying, demonstrating a mastery of both fist techniques and sword kinesis that surpasses even the most seasoned masters. After these grueling battles, he meets the legendary Old Sword Immortal, who oversees the border. Upon reaching Stalactite Mountain, Chen shares an emotional and long-awaited reunion with Ning Yao. Following their confession of mutual feelings, Chen prepares for the final stage of his ascent to the legendary Great Wall, steadfast in his resolve to hone his craft and protect those he holds dear. If possible, you can support me via PayPal or become a channel member to help me keep this channel running. Thank you. Now let's get back to the story of Sword of Coming audio series. Chapter 501. The first attendant of the Water God Temple was a woman whom the Water Goddess had saved from drowning. After being rescued, the woman had become a devout follower of the Water Goddess, and even abandoned her life of riches to become the temple attendant of the Water God Temple. She had stayed in this role for 50 years, starting off as a young woman and eventually becoming a gray-haired old lady. Due to her lack of cultivation aptitude, she had ultimately passed away at 80 years old. It was this temple attendant who had diligently traveled around the area to attract followers and worshippers for the Water Goddess. Year after year, she would also set up kanji stalls to help impoverished commoners. Before passing away, the elderly woman had held the Water Goddess' slender and jade-like hand and chuckled in a hoarse voice that the Water Goddess was still as beautiful as always. However, it was a shame that the craftsmen weren't talented enough to capture 1/10,000th of her beauty when making her gold statue. As the temple attendant, the fault lay with her. At the very end, the teary-eyed old lady had asked the Water Goddess one final thing. Have I made up for my sins? However, she had passed away before the Water Goddess could say anything. The temple attendant had remained deeply pious all the way until death, yet in reality, she hadn't always been a good person, especially in the eyes of the common people. When she was young, her husband was a merchant who would often be away from home and traveling outside. Unable to withstand the loneliness, she developed an illicit relationship with another man. After this was exposed, she worked together with her new lover to kill her husband. Then she successfully remarried and even seized all of her ex-husband's assets and wealth. She completely humiliated her ex-husband and lived a happy life for several years. However, born from sinful karma, her new relationship also died with sinful retribution. While enjoying an outing one time, her new husband took a fancy to another woman and decided to beat her half dead. He then tossed her into Burial River and left her for dead. However, the Water Goddess had never understood the behavior and emotions of these mortal people. It was only after she read the books and essays written by the scholarly sage that the Water Goddess had attained sudden enlightenment. Human nature was innately bad, so it was necessary to educate people and guide them to be good. As the Water Goddess of Burial River, she could rely on the incense offerings to see through the thoughts of her worshippers. In the beginning, she had abhorred the hideous nature of the human mind. In fact, she had even felt a sense of repulsion toward the wafting incense smoke, feeling like she would gain an extra wisp of bad karma for each wish that she allowed to come true. It was only after reading the scholarly sage's teachings that her mindset had started to change. She had started to rule Burial River with authority, using her might to suppress and deter sinister thoughts. At the same time, she had also joined forces with several city gods from the cities along the banks of Burial River, revealing their divine powers numerous times. The Water Goddess had also spared no effort when it came to using her mystical powers when the imperial court prayed for rain, and she would fight to fulfill the wishes of the people even if it meant damaging her cultivation base and causing her gold statue to lose its luster. However, after many hundreds of years, there would eventually come a time when one's patience was finally worn thin. The water goddess frequented her temple less and less, becoming increasingly inclined to stay in her green roving residence where she would shut the doors and turn away all visitors. Putting all of her focus on that immortal mantra, she had concentrated on refining weapon after weapon, using this as a means to alleviate boredom in her life as a god. There was a more important secret, and that was the fact that the ancient immortal mantra could be used for more than just refining tools and weapons. It could also be used for refining the water of Burial River, as well as the incense offerings from the mortal world. This immortal mantra was genuinely a powerful mystical ability that could allow one to master a myriad of things. The water goddess had initially had some thoughts about the little girl called Pei Qian. Since fate had brought her here, and her aptitude was so outstanding, perhaps it was the intangible and undetectable will of the heavens for Pei Qian to succeed her divine position and inherit this paramount immortal mantra. However, it was a shame that things hadn't quite worked out as the water goddess had imagined. Thus, she had no option but to keep waiting. The passing down of divine positions was extremely similar to how Qi refiners recruited disciples. This was no small matter, and a single mistake could result in not only the disciple facing calamity but the master being killed as well. On the less severe end of the scale, the disciple might become an ungrateful wretch who betrayed their master and disparaged their ancestors. For example, just how profoundly knowledgeable was the scholarly sage, the Confucian sage, whom she admired the most. Yet, hadn't he also taken an ungrateful disciple like Cui Chan? The first light of dawn shone through the window and scattered across the floor of the main hall. The water goddess retracted her gaze and heaved a soft sigh. The old temple attendant was standing in the doorway, with tears of joy trickling down her aged face filled with wrinkles. This was truly a delightful occasion. With the water goddess' divine status advancing to the next level, it was naturally the case that all of her followers in the water god temple could ride on her coattails and receive benefits as well. From today onward, that river demon would have to live with its tail between its legs. It wouldn't dare to cause trouble anymore. Not only that, but it was very likely that all of the officials, from the officials in the state governor's manor to the officials in the prefectural overseer's residence and then to the officials in the various county offices, would need to show even more respect when interacting with the water goddess and her followers. In fact, even that haughty governor who was a benefactor to the old temple attendant might have to show more respect to the old woman in the future. There was unease in the old temple attendant's voice as she asked, "Miss Water Goddess, almost all of the city gods, mountain lords, and minor river guardians from around Burial River have hurried over here to offer their congratulations to you. They understand your temper, so they won't dare to disturb you and linger in green roving residence for too long. They've all prepared valuable gifts for you, and they're waiting for your reply outside your temple. Miss Water Goddess, are you going to grant them an audience? If you're tired, then I can help you explain the situation and turn them away. They won't dare to complain." The water goddess' voice was calm and indifferent as she replied, "I still have some time, so it won't hurt to grant them an audience. Educating the 900,000 people in my jurisdiction isn't something that the water god temple can do alone. We need to work together with the other deities." The old temple attendant was deeply astonished by the water goddess' reply. She didn't understand why the lazy water goddess was suddenly changing her attitude. However, this was fundamentally a good thing, so she immediately turned around and left to carry out the water goddess' wishes. If the water goddess was willing to spend some time and effort to gain support from other mountain gods and river gods in the various jurisdictions, then the water god temple would definitely gain much more influence and become the undisputed #1 water god temple in the Great Quan Empire. People would definitely rally to its calls. Since the death of that first temple attendant, the water god temple had already gone through numerous other temple attendants. From the beginning to the end, however, the water goddess had never developed an emotional attachment with any of them. The temple attendants came and left, the temple attendants lived and died. This was all there was to it. Right now, the water goddess looked like she was speaking with an old friend even though she was all by herself. She smiled and said, "I heard that there are 2 clans in Mirage City who are the best at constructing clay statues of gods. The Zhang clan style specializes in plump but beautiful faces, and this allows the statues to appear even more stylish and elegant. On the other hand, the Chao clan style is known for its flowing clothes that make the statues appear ethereal like immortals. Which one do you think suits me better? Which style do you prefer more? The corners of her lips curled up into a wide smile, causing her eyes to become slightly squinted. She then waved her hand and announced, "There's no need for you to mull over this. Just pick whichever clan is more confident and has a higher asking price. After all, there's no need for us to worry about money right now." Dawn sunlight shone down on the relay station located near the bank of Burial River, and old General Yao discovered that Qian Ping'an still hadn't left his room to eat breakfast. He couldn't help but find this slightly strange. However, Julien smiled and explained that his young master was yet to return from a trip outside. Qian Ping'an had suddenly decided to visit the magnificent water god temple last night. That being the case, Julien suggested that old General Yao and his convoy set off first. His young master would definitely catch up later in the day. Yao Zhen smiled and joked that Qian Ping'an was truly a disloyal friend. Since Qian Ping'an had decided to visit the water god temple last night, he should have invited him along as well. After all, it wouldn't hurt to delay their trip by 1 or 2 days. Julien remained silent, not saying anything to complicate the situation. He smiled and stepped back, returning to his table with Lu Baixiang and the others. Lu Baixiang looked at him, but Julien shook his head with a smile and said, "There's no need to ask me anything. Young master didn't tell me to accompany him last night, and he simply said that he would return as soon as possible. He asked me to return to the relay station to pass on this message." Wei Xian didn't say anything, and his chopsticks were a blur as he lowered his head and ate kanji. As for Sui Yubian, she possessed the most unique aura out of the 4 so-called servants. This was the case in terms of both her posture and her manner of eating. Even the most clueless member of the Yao clan's convoy felt stunningly beautiful woman with a sword on her back was definitely no ordinary person. Not a single young master in the Great Quan Empire was worthy of having her as a subordinate. Lu Baixiang furrowed his brow. Julien smiled and asked, "What's wrong? You don't trust me? Even if I have ulterior motives, do I look like I have the ability to act on them?" Julien's smile grew even wider when he saw that Lu Baixiang was unwilling to speak with him. Sitting at the cornermost table in the relay station, Yin Miaofeng and Xiao Yuanran exchanged a glance. However, the master and disciple Taoist priests didn't make any comment on this topic. Even so, their voices were already sounding in each other's minds. While drinking a small bowl of rice kanji, Xiao Yuanran asked using his mind's voice, "Is it possible that this person was related to the phenomenon that appeared in the water god temple of Burial River late last night?" "Perhaps," Yin Miaofeng replied. Logically speaking, however, the likelihood isn't very big. After all, the phenomenon of heaven and earth attracted by the water goddess was a sign that she was forming a golden core. However, even noble scholar Zhong Kuei might not possess the ability to help the water goddess advance to the golden core tier. In saying this, I have to admit that young Master Qian possesses a mysterious background and can't be viewed through ordinary lenses. In any case, there's no need for us to worry about this. As long as this matter doesn't complicate the situation and cause additional trouble, we've already completed our mission, and we can report back to the Imperial Lu clan of the Great Quan Empire. Whether Green Roving Residence is promoted to the level of palace or not, it's already won the promise of the noble scholar from Great Subduing Academy. This is a huge blessing for the water goddess. Now that she's advanced her divine cultivation base relying on her own abilities, we can actually take advantage of our visit last night and talk about this as well. We can bask in her glory, and I might even be able to obtain some benefits for you. Xiao Yuanran nodded in understanding. He glanced at Yao Jinji out of the corners of his eyes and didn't say anything else. The stunningly beautiful woman from the Yao clan was wearing her veiled hat again. Even though Yao Xianji and Yao Lingji were direct descendants of the Yao clan and the clan had especially high hopes for them, they still didn't have the right to sit at the same table as their grandpa Yao Zhan. The 3 other people sitting with Yao Zhan were all veteran soldiers who had fought alongside the old general for half their lives. This had nothing to do with their military ranks. Yao Zhan viewed this as natural and justified, while the 3 veteran soldiers didn't see anything wrong with it either. Yao Xianji winked and made a face at Yao Lingji. "What are you doing?" Yao Lingji asked. Yao Xianji lowered his voice and replied, Say, do you think young Master Chan came across some foolish evildoers last night? Do you think he's gone off to vanquish demons and slay fiends? Just think about it. Chan Ping'an might be relying on his own strength to pummel those hundreds of kilometers of demons in Burial River until they're wailing in despair and agony. Just how mighty and gallant will this scene be? You're not fully awake yet, are you? Are you truly that fond of daydreaming? Yao Lingji huffed in reply. Yao Xianji raised an eyebrow and asked, do you think young Master Chan is unable to do this? No, I feel like there aren't that many ghosts and spirits in Burial River, Yao Lingji replied. After all, there's the water god temple to suppress them. Yao Xianji laughed and exclaimed, just as I thought. In reality, you also believe in young Master Chen's ability, don't you? Yao Lingji scowled at him and snapped, eat your kanji. Yao Xianji smiled happily and remarked, today's kanji is extra delicious. Which young boy didn't admire and look up to genuinely gallant individuals? Chan Ping'an woke up with a start, drenched in sweat, and sat up in bed. Only after carefully thinking over the events of last night did he feel slightly more at ease. In his memory, he had only explained the theory of sequential order created by the scholarly sage, and he hadn't talked too much about the competition between the third and fourth sages of Confucianism. He hadn't talked much about Mr. Qi either. Even so, he still needed to give the water goddess some warnings when he saw her in a moment. They could talk freely behind closed doors, yet they couldn't mention these things in public. Otherwise, he could simply avoid trouble by returning to Eastern Treasured Vile Continent. But the water goddess couldn't just dig up her green roving residence and gold statue and leave. Chan Ping'an glanced down at his boots next to the bed and faltered for a moment. This was because his boots were pointing toward the bed. Chan Ping'an shook his head. All right then, you were afraid that I wouldn't notice that you took my boots off for me? You're filled with smarts, so why aren't you willing to use these smarts for studying? Chan Ping'an went to the courtyard. It was nearing 9 o'clock, so it was very likely that the convoy of the Yao clan had already set off. He and Pei Qian needed to make haste to catch up to the main group. Disregarding the 150 kilometers along the bank of Burial River to the relay station, they were still 2 hours behind the main group. However, he was feeling extremely awake and refreshed after drinking the 100-year-old blooming water wine last night. Not only were his wounds from the battle in the border largely healed, but even his mind was feeling especially peaceful and relaxed. This was analogous to a room that was filled with too many trinkets. Even if the owner of the room viewed all of these trinkets as treasures, they would definitely feel far more satisfied if everything was tidied up one day. There was a young maidservant standing near the doorway of the courtyard. None other than the water ghost who had brought Pei Qian over to look at the spirit wall last night. She smiled beautifully at Chan Ping'an and explained, Young Master Chan, milady asked me to wait here and bring you to the main hall where you drank last night. The maidservant covered her mouth and giggled, carefully considering her words before replying. The young lady woke up a bit earlier than you. She only slept for less than 2 hours before waking up, so I brought her on a tour around Green Roving Residence. The young lady is extremely lively and outgoing, and everyone in the residence likes her very much. Chan Ping'an hesitated for a moment, and he eventually decided to ask in a direct manner. She didn't ask Green Roving Residence for anything, did she? The maidservant hurriedly shook her head and replied, No, she didn't. She genuinely didn't ask for anything. The young maidservant was clearly a bad liar. Chan Ping'an felt slightly helpless as he asked, What did she ask for? We won't take it with us if it's too valuable. However, I can pay for it if it's only an ordinary item. The maidservant was fidgety and uneasy as she replied. She only asked for some brushes and paper that Green Roving Residence purchased from the marketplace. She said that she would start practicing how to draw talismans from today onward. She also said that she would eventually repay Green Roving Residence for these items. Young Master Chan, she only asked for some brushes and paper, and these things genuinely aren't worth much money. Please don't criticize the young lady for this. How about you treat this as my gift to the young lady? You might not know, young master, but it's already been many years since I've last interacted with someone. I'm extremely happy that the young lady was willing to chat with me, and I feel so joyful that it's as if I'm celebrating New Year like living people. Chan Ping'an smiled and replied, Then I'll treat this as your gift to her. However, I'll still ask her to thank you in a moment. A smile spread across the maidservant's face as she curtsied and said, Young Master Chan is such a considerate person. I hope you can visit green roving residents often in the future. When Chan Ping'an saw Pei Qian, there was a dazzling smile plastered on the little girl's face. There's nothing you want to say? Chan Ping'an asked. Pei Qian shot a glare at the female ghost standing behind Chan Ping'an before huffing and retrieving a small calligraphy brush which had its tip made from rabbit hair. She then lifted her coat, revealing a large bundle of xian paper hidden in her clothes. 1. I already told Big Sister Xianhua that I'm only borrowing this brush and paper from green roving residents, Pei Qian hurriedly said. I'll definitely pay them back in the future. I only hid them away because I was afraid that you wouldn't agree. Even if you start earning money in the future. Do you know just how far away Eastern Treasured Vial Continent and Parasol Leaf Continent are? Chan Ping'an asked. How will you pay them back in the future? If you ask an immortal ferry station to deliver the money for you, the delivery fee alone will be enough for you to buy a residence in the capital of Southern Garden Nation. Can you say for sure that you'll be able to earn so many taels of silver? There was a baffled expression on Pei Qian's face. Chan Ping'an chuckled coldly and continued. Perhaps this was your main consideration? You knew this was the case, so that's why you said you were willing to repay the money in the future. Pei Qian smiled awkwardly as her eyes darted around. She didn't dare to look at Chan Ping'an. Chan Ping'an reached over. A sullen expression spread across Pei Qian's face and she exclaimed, You're not allowed to smack my head or twist my ears. You can hit me anywhere else. Chan Ping'an chuckled in slight anger and instructed, Hand me the brush and paper, I'll keep them safe for you. This big sister just said that this is her farewell gift to you. Pei Qian handed the brush and paper to Chan Ping'an before looking toward the beautiful female ghost, holding her hand to her mouth and giggling. She put on an extremely grateful expression and said, Big Sister Xianhua, you're such a good person. No, you're such a good ghost. You should become the next water goddess. Chan Ping'an placed the brush and paper inside his pocket treasure located inside his sword-nurturing gourd. He then shot a glance at Pei Qian. Pei Qian immediately came to a realization, and she bowed and thanked the young maidservant. The two people and one ghost walked to the main hall where the water goddess had already been waiting for a long time. Compared to her careless and bold nature from before, the water goddess of Burial River finally appeared more like a deity today. She was wearing a magnificent brocade robe that was similar to the garb of wives and mothers of officials in the imperial court. After the maidservant Xianhua took her leave, the water goddess directly said in a solemn voice, Chan Ping'an, a drop of kindness should be repaid with a spring of goodwill. And what you gave me was far more than just a drop, so I definitely need to give you something in return. Otherwise, I'll be riddled with unease and guilt. I thought about this for a while, and there's nothing in green roving residence that you'll take a fancy to. The weapons that I've refined are only SOSO, but the two immortal treasures are my bonded weapons that I can't offer to you. As for the other weapons, none of them are high-grade enough. In any case, these weapons won't be enough to repay this debt of gratitude even if I give them all to you. That being the case, I want to give you the immortal mantra inscribed on the rain-praying tablet outside my temple. The water goddess retrieved a jade slip and continued, I hope that you immediately destroy this jade slip after memorizing the immortal mantra. It's not that I'm stingy, but rather because the mantra recorded on the stone tablet pertains to the Tao attainment catalyst of an ancient immortal. This is a huge fated opportunity that pertains to even greater karma. As a result, carelessly disseminating this immortal mantra isn't necessarily a good thing. In fact, failing to withstand the might of this immortal mantra might lead to disastrous results. Chan Ping'an nodded in response, smiling as he reached over to accept the jade slip. He then swiftly placed it inside his flying sword, 15th. The water goddess was slightly surprised and she asked, Aren't you going to decline my offer and say a few polite words first? Then, if we go back and forth about it until you finally concede, it will surely be a better display of the sincere friendship between us. Chan Ping'an suppressed his laughter and replied, Truth be told, I genuinely need a high-grade tool refinement mantra right now. I mysteriously started to wander around with my soul last night, and I impulsively decided to head straight to your water god temple. Zhong Kuei also mentioned a fated opportunity, so I surmise this is what he was talking about. This is akin to a blessing from the heavens, so I'll surely suffer a backlash if I don't grab it with both hands. The water goddess scratched her head and conceded, That all makes sense. but I can't help but feel like there's a little something missing. Imagine if you acted in a righteous manner and turned down my gift, saying that noble people didn't seek rewards when they helped other people. Afterward, I would weep and holler and threaten suicide, insisting that you must accept my gift no matter what. In the end, both you and I would bid farewell to each other while brimming with happiness and satisfaction. Just how interesting would that have been? Chen Ping'an smiled and remained silent. Following this exchange, the water goddess planned to bring Chen Ping'an and Pei Qian to Burial River, where she would once again use the mystical ability from last night to transport them to the relay station that was located upstream. Mountain gods and river gods possessed the mystical ability to travel hundreds of kilometers in but a moment, and this was the divine ability that qi refiners were most fond of. Apart from this, qi refiners were probably most fond of the gods' and deities' advantage when they stayed in their own shrines and temples. In such situations, gods and deities would enjoy an advantage similar to what Confucian sages enjoyed in Confucian academies and spiritual masters in Taoist temples. Perhaps unwilling to bid farewell to Chen Ping'an and Pei Qian too soon, the water goddess traveled by foot as she led them to the entrance of Green Roving Residence. As they approached the entrance, she suddenly turned around and asked, "Chen Ping'an, do you have any books written by the scholarly sage? It would be best if it's a book that the scholarly sage personally gave to you. Rest assured, I won't be so reckless as to flagrantly enshrine it in my water god temple. That would be asking for trouble. Instead, I'll secretly hide it in my Green Roving Residence and place it together with the memorial tablet that I personally made. This is one of my biggest wishes, and it's also a result of my desires. My divine Tao has taken a huge step forward, and my cultivation base has also risen explosively. However, this implies that I'll have an even greater need for the scholarly sage's knowledge and principles in the future. I need to transform these inanimate principles into a living and breathing part of myself. My instinct tells me that if I succeed, I can advance even further. In fact, my water god temple might even become superior to the temples of the formal gods of the Great Quan Empire's 5 mountains." Seeing Chen Ping'an remain silent, the water goddess stopped and continued, "I'm begging you, Chen Ping'an." There was a rare expression of pleading on her face. Chen Ping'an mulled over this for a long time before replying, "The old scholar did indeed give me an elementary Confucian text. However, it isn't a book written by him." The water goddess was delighted upon hearing this, and she exclaimed, "It doesn't matter as long as it's a book from the scholarly sage. I'm not stupid, so I'm well aware that the book definitely contains the true intent of the great Tao." Chen Ping'an recalled his first encounter with the short water goddess. With a saber by her waist and a sword on her back, she had wielded an iron spear almost twice as long as she was tall while battling against the river demon at the bottom of Burial River. She had appeared extremely mighty and impassioned. He also recalled her visit to the water god temple, and she hadn't appeared arrogant or haughty in the least while speaking with Zhong Kuei. In fact, she had been so calm and reasonable that she hadn't appeared like a deity at all. Rather, she had appeared like a genuine scholar. Chen Ping'an sighed and turned to the skinny little girl standing beside him, asking, "Pei Qian, you've probably memorized the book that I always tell you to read, so perhaps you can give it to Miss Water Goddess?" The water goddess faltered upon hearing this. Chen Ping'an was actually asking Pei Qian for approval? What happened next baffled her even more. Pei Qian bit her lips and refused to speak no matter what. She was even more unwilling to nod in agreement. Chen Ping'an grabbed his sword nurturing gourd and drank a mouthful of wine. The water goddess gritted her teeth and said, "I actually have another incredibly valuable treasure in my Green Roving Residence, and this treasure is definitely no inferior to that immortal mantra. I'm willing to exchange this treasure for your book." After saying this, she smiled at Pei Qian and continued, "Apart from repaying Chen Ping'an for his kindness, I'll also give you an impressive treasure. I don't dare to claim that it's extremely valuable, but it's definitely an incredibly rare treasure." However, Pei Qian simply stood there, refusing to say anything and refusing to nod in agreement. Her small hands were tightly clenched as she tugged the corners of her clothes. She was afraid that Chen Ping'an would get angry at her and detest her even more, yet she was also afraid that Chen Ping'an would nod and agree to the water goddess offer. At this moment, Chen Ping'an retied the sword nurturing gourd to his waist before bending down and surprisingly smiling at Pei Qian. He patted her small head and said, "It's okay if you don't want to." Pei Qian wrapped her arms around Chen Ping'an and burst into tears. Chen Ping'an didn't know what was going through her mind at this moment, and he was mystified as to why she was suddenly crying. He flashed a helpless smile at the water goddess and apologized. "I'm sorry about this. However, I'll try my best to find a suitable book for you when I return to Eastern Treasured Vile Continent. I'll send the book to you when I find it. In terms of repaying me or whatnot, there's absolutely no need for this." The water goddess heaved a forlorn sigh. She glanced at Chen Ping'an before glancing at Pei Qian, and there was pain and disappointment in her voice as she replied, "That's the only option then." Arriving on the bank of Burial River, Chen Ping'an put Pei Qian on his back and jumped into the water. With a flick of her large sleeve, the water goddess once again summoned a strange whirlpool similar to the one that Zhu Lian had seen last night. In the next moment, the three of them had already traveled 150 kilometers upstream. One person hovered to the bank, while one person strode across the water to the bank. The water goddess stood on the bank of Burial River. Chen Ping'an bid farewell to her before turning around and leaving. After walking for a while, he seemingly said something to Pei Qian that caused her to burst into tears. With tears streaming down her face, the little girl turned around to wave goodbye to the water goddess. The water goddess smiled and waved back. The young boy and the little girl gradually walked further and further away. However, Pei Qian continued to sob as she rested on Chen Ping'an's back. "You didn't do anything wrong, so why are you crying?" Chen Ping'an asked with a smile. Pei Qian rested her head against Chen Ping'an's back and said, "I'm sorry. You were right, all I do is lose money," the little girl said in a heartbroken voice. Chen Ping'an chuckled in mock anger and replied, "What nonsense are you speaking? Remember to study more diligently in the future." Pei Qian sniffed and nodded earnestly in response. "Don't wipe your snot on me," Chen Ping'an huffed. Pei Qian leaned back a little before helping to wipe the tears and snot from Chen Ping'an's back. Chen Ping'an and Pei Qian eventually vanished into the distance. Only then did the water goddess break into hearty laughter. As expected of the scholarly sage's direct disciple. In reality, Chen Ping'an had always planned to give the book to her. Moreover, how many people in the world would care about the opinion of a little girl, if they were offered such a profoundly valuable treasure? Her smile was eventually replaced by a solemn expression, as she bowed deeply in Chen Ping'an's direction. Sure enough, different people would learn Tao at different times. To sit down and discuss Tao last night, and to stand up and act upon Tao today. Such was the unity of knowledge and action. Chen Ping'an was a genuine scholar. Chen Ping'an was a true teacher. The Yao clan conducted itself in an old-fashioned manner, and there were some members of the convoy waiting for Chen Ping'an at the relay station. Zhu Lian was among them, and the young scout Yao Xianji had also stubbornly insisted on staying back. Chen Ping'an apologized to the two veteran soldiers from the Yao clan who were also waiting for him. The veteran soldiers laughed heartily, and one of them hurriedly shook his hands and said there was no need for Chen Ping'an to be so polite. After all, the relationship between them was much closer than this, so there was no need for Chen Ping'an to thank them for waiting. Meanwhile, Yao Xianji looked at Chen Ping'an as if he were looking at a general who had just returned after completing great feats on the battlefield. This left Chen Ping'an slightly mystified. The six of them mounted their horses and set off, traveling swiftly to catch up with the main group. Pei Qian was riding the same horse with Chen Ping'an, which made the little girl extremely happy. Old General Yao Zhan had instructed the main group to travel slowly, so it wasn't long before Chen Ping'an and the others saw them in the distance. After resting and recuperating for a while, and thanks to the precious medicines given to him by one of the princes, Yao Zhan had almost made a full recovery from the wounds he had suffered at the hands of the two assassins already. They were also traveling slower than usual today, so Yao Zhan left his carriage and started to travel on horseback after obtaining Yao Jinji's consent. He was an old man who had spent more than half his life battling on horseback, after all. He had become accustomed to rapid long-distance marches at a very young age, so he wouldn't fall off his horse even if he fell asleep. Yao Zhan rode alongside Chen Ping'an, enjoying the relaxing scenery together as he chatted with his young benefactor. Chen Ping'an told him about Burial River's water god temple, and Yao Zhan was clearly in a good mood and full of vigor as he laughed heartily. Chen Ping'an asked Yao Zhan if he could help him obtain a geomancy map of Burial River from the officials, and the old general agreed to his request without asking a single question. Pei Qian had already been shooed off into a carriage by Qian Ping'an, and she once again ended up in the same carriage as Sui Yubian. The latter was sitting cross-legged and resting her mind with her eyes closed. Her sword was placed horizontally across her knees, making her aura appear stern and forbidding. Pei Qian had never liked this ice-cold woman, especially since Sui Yubian always had an aloof expression as if everyone owed her dozens of taels of silver. Who was this stinky expression for? She needed to be careful or else she might become an ugly old lady in no time. Afterward, she pulled a book that was full of wrinkles and creases from the bottom of the sack before taking a glance at the pair of boots nearby. This was a new pair of boots that they had purchased not long ago, yet it was already caked in mud due to their travels. She stuck her tongue out and hurriedly put her luggage sack away, not daring to let other people see its contents. Leaning back and lying down, Pei Qian held the old and damaged book with both hands and raised it high into the air. After flipping through it again and again for a long time, she eventually placed the book on her face and fell fast asleep. Before falling asleep, Pei Qian had thought about what Qian Ping'an had said to her not long ago, telling her to study diligently in the future. She shouldn't spend all of her energy on simply memorizing the books. Pei Qian had contemplated this for a moment, but she was truly far too tired today. That being the case, she would start studying diligently from tomorrow onward. She would definitely start from tomorrow. However, she had quickly recalled another saying, "After tomorrow is another tomorrow, so just how many tomorrows are there?" With this in mind, the little girl had been so amused and delighted that she had almost laughed out loud. Thus, the little girl enjoyed a particularly sweet and comfortable nap today. Sui Yubian opened her narrow peach blossom eyes and exhaled lightly. However, she quickly raised her palm to gently shatter her exhaled aura in an instant. Apart from the taciturn Wei Xian, the first one to be awakened, the three other martial artists had all walked out from their picture scrolls and arrived in Majestic World on the same day. Zhu Lian was practicing fist techniques that belonged to external martial arts, and he would only go from external to internal after reaching the pinnacle of martial arts. Otherwise, this martial arts maniac who had been killed by Ding Ying wouldn't have tried to kill the 9 other superior grandmasters of his generation. During that brutal battle, the most terrifying thing about Zhu Lian was his ability to become stronger and deadlier the more wounded he was. Even though fortune had favored Ding Ying and allowed him to emerge the final victor, even granting him that silver-colored lotus flower hat, Ding Ying had never mentioned his battle with Zhu Lian in the capital of Southern Garden Nation to anyone else. He hadn't mentioned it even after gaining the title of strongest in the world. Indeed, it was very likely that there were many untold secrets about their battle. Liu Baixiang was extremely talented, and he could learn things very quickly and very well. Thus, his martial arts cultivation had advanced in leaps and bounds. He was quite similar to Ding Ying, someone who had inherited the title of strongest in the world after him in the lotus flower-blessed land. However, Liu Baixiang's ambitions hadn't been as insane and pure as Ding Ying's. Thus, he had remained single and alone, and he had enjoyed traveling around the world. Hence, he had fallen into a trap and been encircled by his foes. After that battle, even the grandmasters who had participated in the bloody conflict and suffered a significant drop in their cultivation bases had felt a hint of respect and admiration toward Liu Baixiang in the depths of their hearts. Moreover, another aspect of that battle had never been made public to the cultivation world. During that intense conflict, the two people who had fought with the most ferocity were actually celestial maidens from renowned forces who had harbored romantic feelings for Liu Baixiang. They had most likely fought with the intention of dying for love. Wei Xian's martial arts aptitude was the rarest, and he was born to oppose entire armies by himself. He was extremely good at breaking through encirclements and formations on his own, and he would charge forward with might and gusto even if there were hundreds of thousands of enemies in his way. Of all the historical records and interesting legends about the founding emperor of Southern Garden Nation, whether official or unofficial, there was almost no mention of him fighting against anyone one-on-one. As for Sui Yubian, she was surprisingly similar to cultivators in Majestic World regardless of whether it was her aptitude or disposition. She didn't seem like a pure martial artist who dreamed of advancing to the N-tier. Even though Sui Yubian had remained cooped up inside carriages and inns recently, her gaze was most certainly not lingering on the mortal world. Instead, it was looking up at the sky. She was experimenting with an unconventional sword technique right now, and this technique could only be viewed as a pipe dream in the context of the lotus flower-blessed land that was lacking in spiritual energy. In Majestic World, however, it possessed immense potential. She had reached a stage similar to that of martial artists filling in the sea. Yet her situation was slightly different in the sense that she needed to accumulate energy between her waist and ribs to create a sword furnace and nurture her sword chi. This sword chi was an imitation of the true chi channeled by pure martial artists, and it would also swim around her body like a fire dragon patrolling its territory. Once Sui Yubian succeeded, she would be refining not just her physique and spirit, but also refining a wisp of sword chi into a sword billet. Not only that, but her sword billet would almost be identical to that of sword cultivators' bonded flying swords. However, Sui Yubian was yet to interact with any information about sword cultivators in Majestic World. She had no chance to interact with their theory and cultivation techniques at this moment. Thus, one could imagine just how talented Sui Yubian was when it came to cultivating the sword. During the past few days, she had only heard some private chatter between the border soldiers of the Yao clan. Many of them had discussed the incredible feats of Qian Ping'an, the Yao clan's benefactor, and some of the conversations had centered around his demeanor as a sword cultivator while fighting against the two assassins who had targeted Yao Zhan. They had mentioned the formidable destructive power and elusive nature of his flying swords, and this had caused Sui Yubian to feel a deep sense of yearning. This was what she desired. The lotus flower-blessed land was far too small, so small that it was unable to accommodate her sword. However, this world was large enough. There would definitely come a day when she would soar to the apex of this world to unleash a formidable sword strike. Sui Yubian closed her eyes again. She definitely wouldn't lose to anyone when it came to cultivation. Her opponents had never been Wei Xian and the others. There was the clip-clop of marching hooves outside the carriage as the convoy of the Yao clan traveled through the flourishing Great Quan Empire. Many village children stopped to look at them, and the adults in the country towns weren't afraid of them either. Instead, there was only curiosity in their eyes. Qian Ping'an observed the common residents of the Great Quan Empire as he traveled through the nation on horseback. Back then, he had crossed the border during a snowstorm while accompanied by the little boy in azure and the little girl in pink. They had come across a group of elite scouts from the Great Li Empire, incredibly capable and well-drilled, and the scouts had smiled and suggested that they head to a nearby beacon tower to weather the snowstorm after seeing their passports and travel documents. Qian Ping'an didn't have a particularly good impression of the emperor of the Great Li Empire, Song Chongjing, or his past neighbor Song Jisin. It was because of his chance encounter with the elite scouts on the border of the Great Li Empire that he wasn't prejudiced against the empire itself. Dusk arrived, and the convoy settled down in a large relay station near a provincial city. The relay station was rather refined, and even had a small garden filled with lush green bamboo. Later in the night, Yao Zhan personally visited Qian Ping'an's room to bring him the geomancy map that he had requested. Qian Ping'an was carefully examining the jade slip that the water goddess had given him at this moment, while Pei Qian was sitting on the opposite end of the table and yawning again and again. There was a treasure pagoda demon-suppressing talisman stuck on Pei Qian's forehead, and the skinny little girl's explanation was that she had heard people say that female ghosts were more prone to appearing in bamboo forests. When the wind whooshed past, she always had a nagging feeling that there were female ghosts hovering back and forth in the bamboo forest outside. When Yao Zhan knocked on the door, Pei Qian immediately ran over to answer. Upon seeing the little girl, the old general asked her why there was a talisman plastered on her forehead. After hearing the explanation, he immediately burst into loud laughter and promised that there was nothing to worry about. Even if ghosts and spirits were truly hiding in the bamboo forest, the young men from the Yao clan were all soldiers who were brimming with yang energy. As such, it was really the ghosts and spirits that needed to be afraid of them instead. "Oh, okay," Pei Qian responded. She plucked the talisman from her forehead and placed it on the table, after which she returned to her room to sleep. Yao Zhan motioned for Qian Ping'an to sit down to chat. Qian Ping'an naturally needed to thank Yao Zhan for obtaining the official geomancy map for him. The imperial court strictly forbade the distribution of such maps to the public, and the control of these maps was even stricter than the control of weapons like bows and crossbows. Yao Zhan chuckled and said, "It's nothing too difficult. The governor agreed to my request quite readily. He doesn't need to worry too much about these matters after climbing to the position of provincial governor. You don't need to feel like you owe me a huge favor either. Actually, Governor Liu was quite reserved and uneasy when he first saw me. However, this is completely understandable because one of his relatives works in the Ministry of War. In other words, I have some influence over him, in a sense. You should have seen his face when I asked him for an official geomancy map. It was filled with relief. Qian Ping'an smiled and replied, "Then if you pardon my rudeness, I'll take that map now." Yao Zhen pointed at Qian Ping'an and shook his head. I truly don't understand you. You became involved in 2 life-and-death battles for the sake of the Yao clan, and just how resolute were you during those times? So how are you so stubborn and pedantic about rules and etiquette when it comes to ordinary everyday interactions? Why are you so unnecessarily polite? Qian Ping'an didn't know how to respond. Yao Zhen lowered his voice and continued. My grandson Yao Xianji was too embarrassed to ask this himself, so he requested that I ask you. Can you give him some guidance regarding martial arts? Qian Ping'an carefully contemplated this for a moment before replying. I'll naturally be okay with this if it's just some casual sparring. If Yao Xianji is determined to make some real progress, however, then I suggest that he looks for Wei Xian instead. I can ask Wei Xian to give him some pointers. That young lad wants to have a casual spar with you, Yao Zhen replied with a serious expression. Then I'll give him some time tomorrow, Qian Ping'an said in slight helplessness. Yao Zhen stroked his beard and chuckled. And I'll also get him to look for Wei Xian after having a casual spar with you. I'll give Wei Xian a heads up later. Anyhow, I can accept this geomancy map without any guilt now. After all, even money can't buy guidance from martial arts elites like us. Yao Zhen smacked the table and laughed heartily. That's the way to go. Now you're showing some of that youthful shamelessness just like I used to. No wonder we get along so well. Qian Ping'an shook his head with a wry smile. Yao Zhen came with a beaming smile and also left with a beaming smile. Qian Ping'an spread the geomancy across the table before retrieving the water seal from his pocket treasure. After lightly breathing on the seal, he earnestly stamped it on the water god temple and green roving residence. Then, he put the water seal and geomancy map away. Qian Ping'an continued to examine the dense rows of small characters on the jade slip that was only the size of a palm. There were a whopping 5,000 characters inscribed on both sides of the jade slip, with an immortal tool refinement mantra inscribed on the front side, and the water goddess notes and insights inscribed on the back side. Even though this was only a tool refinement mantra on the surface, its contents actually pertained to the great Tao of the 5 elements. The mantra was clear and concise, and its core principle was deep and profound. Because the water goddess had comprehended this mantra from a rain-paying tablet, she had decided to use the water element of the 5 elements to roughly expound on the mantra. Of the 5 internal organs, it was the kidneys that corresponded to water. Of the 5 facial features, it was the ears. Of the 5 senses, it was sound. Of the 5 fingers, it was the pinky. Of the 5 fluids, it was saliva. Of the 5 sounds, it was urine. Of the 5 emotions, it was fear. Of the 5 worships, it was the well. Of the numerous deities, it was the black tortoise of the north. The mantra was clear and straightforward, and the water goddess had inscribed clear explanations regarding the relevant acupoints and refinement methods on the backside of the jade slip. It could be said that the water goddess had inscribed everything she knew onto the jade slip. In fact, she had even detailed the ability of this immortal mantra to refine incense offerings and one's gold statue, clearly explaining everything to Qian Ping'an. Qian Ping'an was stirred by what he read. Only at this moment did he realize the profound significance of the phrase, "A drop of water from a golden bottle," inscribed on the stone tablet. It referred to the fact that after achieving great mastery of this immortal mantra, one could essentially melt their golden core into water essence, and have this water essence nurture their bodies. Meanwhile, the phrase "weaving through the sky like fabric being made" referred to the method through which the relay stations of one's meridians could be linked together, thereby allowing the meridians to work in concert with each other. Regarding the phrase "transforming into the coolness of the 4 heavens," the scorching heat is swept away. The 4 heavens pertain to heavenly world controlled by the Taoist sect. There were 4 floors in the White Jade capital that could help cultivators suppress their internal demons through 4 different Taoist techniques. These weren't heretical techniques, but rather the most orthodox techniques of the Taoist sect. Indeed, suppressing one's internal demons using these techniques was a smooth-sailing process that all nascent-tier cultivators dreamed of experiencing. The Earth Immortals at the peak of the mountains wouldn't necessarily succeed, but they would essentially be constructing for heavenly bridges and giving themselves for chances to guarantee that they wouldn't wander down heretical paths by accident. In fact, they would even have the opportunity to backtrack and return to a past state. In addition to all this, the Earth Immortals could also nurture their physiques and souls. Who wouldn't covet such a profound fated opportunity? It was no wonder that the water goddess had boldly claimed that this immortal mantra could refine all matter. At the same time, she had also speculated that this immortal mantra was a priceless treasure accessible by only the leader of an immortal force. Chen Ping'an closed his eyes and silently recited the 5,000 characters in his mind. He decided that he wouldn't carelessly take the jade slip out for no reason in the future. For some unknown reason, Chen Ping'an felt a cool sensation wash over his body as he held the jade slip in his hand. He felt extremely comfortable, and the wounds that he had suffered during the battle in the border started to heal at an incredible speed. Chen Ping'an opened his eyes wide upon noticing these mystical effects. However, he was unable to identify the type of rare jade that the jade slip was made of. He would ask Wei Bo when he returned to Downtrodden Mountain. Past midnight, a cloud of water vapor suddenly suffused through the relay station, shrouding everything in a sheet of white mist. Yin Miaofeng and Xiao Yuanran were forced to stop their meditation and breathing techniques. They left their rooms at the same time and walked toward the garden. Chen Ping'an also stopped his session of standing meditation, opening his window and jumping out of his room. A short time later, the members of the Yao clan quickly woke up and got dressed following a series of urgent warnings from the accompanying cultivators. The veteran soldiers also put on their armor and grabbed their weapons, standing ready to fight at any moment. It was pitch black inside Zhu Lian's room, yet the hunchbacked old man was actually walking in circles around the table the entire time. He remained silent, and there were very particular reasons for his gait. Sui Yubian was sitting cross-legged on her bed, and she opened her eyes before closing them again. Wei Xian's body was extremely straight as he lay in bed, and his hands were clenched into fists and resting on his abdomen. He was completely unmoving. Lu Baixiang walked over to the window before coming to a stop. Inside the bamboo forest, Yin Miaofeng and Xiao Yuanran breathed a sigh of relief when they saw the uninvited guest. Taoist preserving innocence, Yin Miaofeng smiled and cupped his fists in congratulations, saying, "Congratulations on your advance, Miss Water Goddess." The person standing in front of them was none other than the short water goddess who was dressed in incredibly beautiful clothes. She had just arrived here after hurriedly making her way over from Green Roving Residence. From today onward, even the temple master of the Golden Summit Taoist Temple could no longer look down on the water goddess thanks to her explosive rise in cultivation. One had to realize that she now possessed power rivaling that of nascent-tier Earth Immortals in the jurisdiction of Burial River, and especially near Green Roving Residence and the Water God Temple. The water goddess smiled and replied, "I was a very impolite host when the two of you visited my Green Roving Residence last time. Apart from coming here for a private matter, I also want to invite Spiritual Master Yin to my residence in the near future. I need to apologize to Spiritual Master Yin and Spiritual Master Little Xiao for my rudeness last time." Yin Miaofeng couldn't help but feel a little overwhelmed by the unexpected favor. Firstly, the water goddess cultivation base was far superior to before. Even though she had traveled all the way to this relay station, she could still be considered a pseudo-nascent tier elite. Secondly, Green Roving Residence had already forged a relationship with Zhong Kuei, a quasi-sage. Thus, the Confucian Academy could only acknowledge the water goddess position even if they chose to completely ignore the imperial Lu clan of the Great Quan Empire. Thirdly, everyone in the top echelon of the Great Quan Empire was well aware of the water goddess' hot temper, so how could Yin Miaofeng, a measly Dragon Gate tier guest elder of the imperial Lu clan, not feel delighted and flattered now that the water goddess was willing to apologize and invite him to her Green Roving Residence? Even the proud and haughty Xiao Yuanran had a wide and sincere smile on his face. Chen Ping'an walked over to the master and disciple, and greeted them first before turning his attention to the water goddess of Burial River. Yin Miaofeng and Xiao Yuanran perceptively took this cue and bid farewell. At the same time, they also informed the veteran soldiers of the Yao clan and the accompanying cultivators that there was no cause for alarm. While explaining this, Miaofeng subtly revealed the identity of the water goddess. Yao Zhan smiled at the water goddess and cupped his fists in respect from far away. He had heard many legends and stories about the water goddess of Burial River, even when he had lived in the border regions. Moreover, the water goddess' temperament and manner of doing things were naturally to his taste. The water goddess also cupped her fists in respect, but the people standing nearby didn't know whether to laugh or to cry upon hearing her response. "Old General, you definitely have to visit my green roving residence for a drink when you retire of old age and return to the border region in the future. There will be enough to drink." Yao Xianji and Yao Lingji rolled their eyes in unison. Yao Jinji was wearing her veiled hat again, and she appeared slim and graceful as she stood beside Yao Zhan. In the end, the water goddess flicked her wrist and retrieved a pot of wine from thin air. She tossed the pot of wine to Qian Ping'an and explained using her mind's voice. "Remember to take care of the jade slip and keep it safe. The jade slip itself is also a valuable treasure, or else it would have been blasted to smithereens by those characters pertaining to the great Tao." After saying this, the water goddess no longer concealed her voice, allowing everyone in the surroundings to hear what she was saying. She appeared especially casual and bold as she laughed heartily and said, "I kept mulling over this while I was hurrying over to the relay station, and I almost felt an urge to repay your gratitude with my body. However, I was thankfully able to rein myself in. I drank almost half of this pot of wine when hurrying over, just trying to muster up some courage. Even so, I'm still too cowardly to utter those embarrassing words. Qian Ping'an, are you disappointed that you've lost such a beautiful and refined wife? Haha. Well, I've coincidentally got half a pot of beautiful wine remaining for you. Here, take it, you can drink this to wash away your sorrows." This water goddess. She came in a hurry and she also left in a hurry. Standing there with half a pot of wine in his hand, Qian Ping'an felt like it would be wrong to drink the wine, yet it would also be wrong to not drink the wine. There was a gloating smile on Yao Zhan's face. After being transfixed with shock for a moment, Yao Xianji extended both his hands and gave Qian Ping'an 2 massive thumbs up. Pei Qian was groggy and half asleep as she stood in the distance. Qian Ping'an put on a stern expression and led Pei Qian back to her room. When parting ways, Qian Ping'an warned in a solemn voice, "If you come across a girl with the surname Ning in the future, remember not to mention the events of tonight." Pei Qian blinked a few times and asked, "What if? And I'm saying what if I accidentally slip up? Then after I've been beaten half dead, I'll make sure to beat you half dead. Do you understand?" Qian Ping'an replied with a grave expression. "I understand." Pei Qian immediately answered in a loud voice, "I've read some books, so I'm filled with unyielding loyalty now. I won't say anything even if I'm beaten to death." They both returned to their own rooms. Qian Ping'an wiped the sweat from his forehead. In the end, he couldn't help but break into laughter. He didn't continue to practice standing meditation, and instead rested his arms and head on the table before retrieving that small saber whetstone. There was the beautiful inscription of the character Innocent on the dragon-slaying platform, and there was also the adorable inscription of the characters Ning Yao. "Ning Yao, I'm doing very well. I've traveled to many places on this trip, and I've come across many people and many things. I miss you a little. No, I miss you a lot." A short woman dressed in beautiful garb suddenly materialized on the bank of Burial River and started to slowly walk forward. Following the rapid rise of her cultivation base, the water goddess of Burial River was now increasingly adept at manipulating the flow of the river from the 2 banks. This was similar to how generals could conquer the land underfoot when they set off on expeditions on horseback. Burial River was a large river that cut across more than half of the Great Quan Empire from the east to the west, yet the water goddess had still struggled to contain the troublemaking river demon that was yet to reach the golden core tier. This was the case even with her multitude of refined weapons, and part of the reason was that she could barely manage to control the might of Burial River. If she recklessly accepted the promotion of her green roving residence to green roving palace, yet the imperial court of the Great Quan Empire was unwilling to offer a portion of the nation's fortune and have a cultivator from the Ministry of Astronomy place it inside the water god temple. What would she do then? This was one of the main reasons the water goddess hadn't accepted the proposal to have her residence promoted to a palace. Once she swapped the old plaque out for one that read Green Roving Palace, It was suffice to say that individuals from all over the empire would become jealous and covet her position. That being the case, there might come a day when both of the plaques were ripped down and used as firewood. The water goddess was a naturally bold and short-tempered person, and there was no need to deny any of this. However, her ability to rule over Burial River for several hundred years and grab all of the fated opportunities with both hands proved that she was definitely no foolish person. She squatted down and scooped up a handful of water from the river. The water in her hands rippled under the soft glow of the moonlight, and it also appeared to contain far more spiritual energy compared to the past. Before hurrying over to the relay station, much of the incense essence that had overflowed from the water god temple had flowed into a certain hall in the temple. Initially silver-white in color, the wisps of incense essence had surprisingly become pale gold as they had flowed toward that gold-gilded clay statue in the main hall. The term gold statue was commonly thrown around, but this didn't refer to the fact that craftsmen gilded the clay statues of deities in gold. Rather, this term was synonymous with godly body, and it pertained to the foundation of a deity's divine Tao. This was a manifestation of the great Tao, and those wisps of pale gold and concentrated incense essence that slowly seeped into the gold statue on the divine altar were referred to as gold decoration in the divine Tao. The second circumstance involved a Confucian sage guiding the gold statue. However, it was important to note that these Confucian sages needed to at least be a mountain master of one of the 72 Confucian academies. Apart from mysteriously enjoying this huge fated opportunity, the water fortune of green roving residents also rose significantly, with auspicious clouds hovering over the residents like an extravagant roof. Right now, green roving residents could almost be regarded as a blessed land for cultivation. This kind of phenomenon was known as receiving official recognition. Green roving residents had genuinely received official recognition from the heaven and earth of majestic world. No matter how naive the water goddess was, she could still tell that this unexpected yet profound fated opportunity was no inferior to what she had gained from Chan Pingin's explanation of sequential order the other night. The water goddess had joked about offering her body as thanks in the relay station, but in reality, she had simply said this because she genuinely had no idea how she could thank Chan Pingin. Indeed, the jade slip that she had given him was already the most valuable treasure of green roving residents. Back in ancient times, Burial River had been one of 3 main rivers in Parasol Leaf continent that had flowed into the sea. Afterward, many changes and transformations had taken place, with altered flow paths, siltation, blockages, and all kinds of other factors causing Burial River to become smaller and smaller. In the end, only a small section of the river managed to survive, and that was Burial River of today. Green roving residence was also built on the ruins of a river dragon palace, and the jade slip that the water goddess had given Chan Pingin was a paramount treasure that she had found in the severely damaged dragon palace. The jade slip had kept its luster even after tens of thousands of years, and it was the physical condensation of that river's water essence. In fact, the river's water essence was a figurative representation of this region's fortune, and it was an old dragon king who had refined the water essence into a jade slip. It was easy to imagine that back in the ancient days when the dragon palace still existed, this jade slip was most likely a precious treasure that the dragon king loved to play around with. The water goddess had warned Chan Pingin to immediately destroy the jade slip after memorizing the immortal mantra. But that was just her teasing him. Chan Pingin would only have the ability to destroy the jade slip after he became an immortal at the upper 5 tiers. However, if Chan Pingin refined this jade slip into a bonded item and mastered the immortal mantra that could allow one to become an immortal in a single step, then she was sure that he would have a great chance to advance to the upper 5 tiers as long as he put in enough time and effort. The water goddess strode into Burial River and walked across its surface, appearing much like a divine lady from the fantasy novels. The only blemish was the fact that the river demon had definitely formed an alliance with some mountain god nearby, allowing it to sneak ashore and hide behind the fortune of some mountain. It had vanished without a trace. The water goddess leaned back and fell onto Burial River, where she continued to lay on the surface of the water just like that. She flowed downstream along with the current of the river. Meanwhile, the water ghosts who had died by drowning formed an impressive procession as they followed the water goddess from the bottom of the river, swimming to the water god temple in the distance. However, the water goddess suddenly covered her face with her hands as if she were too embarrassed to face other people. How could a young maiden like me utter such embarrassing words? However, she quickly recovered her fighting spirit in no time, sitting up and exclaiming in delight, "Make haste and instruct someone to travel to Mirage City to hire some craftsmen. I'm going to reconstruct my statue." People rely on elegant robes, just as deities rely on golden garb. If the curves of the statue need to be more exaggerated around the chest, then so be it. The legs can also be a little longer. Some water ghosts who had regained intelligence were quite surprised when they heard the water goddess instructions. This was truly a very eye-opening experience. There was actually such an interesting side to the water goddess. There were many hilarious encounters as the Yao clan's convoy traveled north. A martial arts cultivator with little renown in the cultivation world traveled over to meet them after hearing of their reputation. He carried a spear made from 8 precious materials, and he claimed that he wanted to witness the might of the Yao clan spear techniques that were considered formidable in the border regions. This martial arts cultivator called all of his friends and companions over, and a dozen or so people quickly rushed over on horseback, stopping neatly on the official road. The martial artist sat on his horse and brandished his spear for a while. His techniques weren't necessarily bad, and it was clear that he had developed some skills after wandering around as a second or third-rate martial artist for more than 10 years. However, his skills and techniques were only useful for sparring with other similarly mediocre martial artists in the cultivation world, and they were naturally no match for the spear techniques of the Yao clan. They weren't on the same level. Thus, victory and defeat were decided in an instant. Yao Zhan was sitting in his carriage and reading a military text at the time, and he couldn't help but find this situation very comedic. However, he didn't stoop to the same level as those mediocre martial artists from the cultivation world who had gone insane trying to become famous. Yao Jinji issued a command, and the mounted troops of the Yao clan silently grabbed their crossbows, terrifying the mediocre martial artists and causing them to immediately flee from the official road. After the convoy of the Yao clan traveled far into the distance, the group of mediocre martial artists cursed in anger, grumbling about how the mounted troops of the Yao clan were all show and no substance. They didn't live up to their reputation, and they didn't even have the courage to step forward and spar with them. In the end, the mediocre martial artists were arrested by the government of the provincial city, and this unfortunate group of friends and companions were forced to enjoy a meal in prison. Afterward, a vagrant cultivator at the lower 5 tiers attempted to become a guest elder, who accompanied the convoy of the Yao clan. This cultivator was quite young, and he was only in his early 20s. He didn't dare to cause a ruckus, and he roughly explained his identity and background to the Yao clan. At the same time, he didn't forget to boast about his powerful immortal techniques. After saying all this, the vagrant cultivator squatted beside the relay station that Yao Zhan and the others were staying in and started to nibble on some dry biscuits and drink some low-quality wine, waiting for the Yao clan to give a reply. In the end, Yao Zhan instructed someone to bring him 100 taels of silver. The vagrant cultivator flushed red with shame, yet he still accepted the silver before taking his leave. As they drew closer and closer to Mirage City, news that Yao Zhan was going to be appointed to the position of head minister of war also started to spread like wildfire, rapidly traveling through the entire imperial court. Sometime later, another dejected and dispirited military cultivator blocked their path. This cultivator was sturdily built and in his youthful prime, and he promised that he would immediately piss off if someone from the Yao clan managed to defeat him. Xiao Yuanran unleashed a single strike, and the sturdy military cultivator indeed pissed off as he had promised. What truly piqued the curiosity of the Yao clan's convoy were 2 interesting matters pertaining to a mountain god entering the water, and a water god entering the mountains. Of course, the mountain god and the water god were nowhere near as powerful and high-ranking as the water goddess of Burial River, but rather, nothing more than the lowest-ranking gods in the local region. The mountain god ruled an area of 50 kilometers in radius, while the so-called water god was actually a river guardian who looked after a river that measured 100 kilometers in length. The mountains neighbored the river, yet the relationship between the mountain lord and the river guardian was quite cold, with the occasional conflict popping up now and then. However, the conflicts had always been quite minor, and they would often just cuss each other near the border of the mountains and the river. Yet, everything changed recently, and this was because a generous worshipper had changed their location of worship, going from the mountain god temple to the water god temple instead. This pertained to an annual offering of more than 100,000 taels of silver. Thus, the low-ranking mountain god had instructed a mountain lord to pay a secret visit to the generous worshipper, hoping to convince them to return to the mountain god temple. Unexpectedly, however, the river guardian had caught the mountain lord in the act, and he had gone as far as to pummel the mountain lord as punishment. Consumed by anger, the mountain god had directly breached his neighbor's territory and jumped into the river, brandishing 2 large axes and triggering huge and tumultuous waves through more than 10 kilometers of the river. This had utterly terrified the nearby residents. How could the river guardian possibly accept such humiliation? Thus, the river guardian had wielded his power and sent river water rushing up the mountains, violently surging toward the mountain god temple. The convoy of the Yao clan was coincidentally traveling near the river at this time, so the 2 guest elders from the imperial court and the qi refiners accompanying the Yao clan guarded Yao Zhan and his 3 grandchildren as they made their way over to watch the conflict. Qian Ping'an also accompanied them, and only Pei Qian and Zhu Lian chose to go with him. And thus, they witnessed the river guardian unleashing violence toward the mountain god temple. The 2 sides battled for a long while, and the mountain god eventually managed to push the river guardian back thanks to his geographical advantage. However, the river guardian unleashed his murky river water again, becoming increasingly bold and courageous as he fought. They exchanged blow after blow, drawing upon their myriad of mystical abilities to attack each other. The mountains were once beautiful, yet they were now completely destroyed after being flooded by the murky river water. Countless towering trees were snapped and fallen. Outside the battlefield, there were mountain lords and mountain spirits standing on the mountains and crustacean soldiers and water ghosts swimming near the banks of the river. They waved flags and screamed in support of their superiors, and they were yelling so loudly that it appeared even more tiring than actually fighting in the battle. Not only that, but the 2 sides also competed with each other, with the crustacean soldiers and water ghosts setting up a large red drum to bang in support of the river guardian. The thunderous sound of the drum reverberated through the area. Upon seeing this, the mountain lords and mountain spirits hurriedly retrieved a gigantic flag that measured dozens of meters in height, forcefully waving it around and causing it to loudly flutter in the air. Xiao Yuanran stood beside Yao Jinji and explained the background of this conflict between the mountain god and the river guardian. He spoke with eloquence, and the young girl Yao Lingji was extremely interested in the story. However, it was anyone's guess as to what big sister Yao Jinji was thinking under her veiled hat. Pei Qian hurriedly collected the fish that were flopping around on the bank of the river. This was far easier than fishing by herself. In the end, this joke of a conflict was brought to an end by the livid city god of the nearby provincial city. He flew over on the wind, and he severely reprimanded the 2 deities as he hovered in midair. This city god was wearing the official garb unique to officials from the Great Quan Empire's Ministry of Rites, and the rank decoration on the front of his garb adhered to similar regulations as those of living officials in the Yang world. The decoration would be a reflection of his official rank. The only difference was that the official garb of city gods was black, and this represented the fact that they were representatives of the mortal emperor, who patrolled the Yin world to keep watch on the many ghosts and Yin souls who wandered around during the night. Qian Ping'an remained calm and composed as he watched the conflict between the mountain god and the river guardian. After all, this conflict was nothing more than a minor skirmish compared to his experiences in Dragon Spring Prefecture and his encounters during his 2 trips to distant continents. This conflict couldn't be regarded as funny, but it certainly wasn't something that would astonish Qian Ping'an. It was very difficult for Qian Ping'an to experience a thrilling sensation similar to that of climbing to the peak of Cloud Drape Mountain for the first time or witnessing a majestic river for the first time. Zhu Lian stood beside Qian Ping'an, and of the 4 subordinates following the young boy, this person left the strongest impression on the members of the Yao clan. This was because compared to the 3 other subordinates, this hunchbacked old man truly appeared like a follower and a servant. Moreover, the members of the Yao clan had heard about the performance of these 4 subordinates in the battle in the border inn, so they were roughly aware that the stunningly beautiful woman with a sword on her back was a sword expert. The dignified and impressive-looking Mr. Liu was a saber-wielding martial arts grandmaster, and the taciturn Wei Xian could rival an entire army by himself, proven by how he had blocked the group of qi refiners from the imperial court. Meanwhile, this hunchbacked and kindly-looking old man was actually the most ferocious and brutal out of the 4 subordinates. Following the conclusion of the intense battle in the border inn, the hunchbacked old man had stood there surrounded by mangled corpses and severed limbs. Julien didn't look at Qian Pingyan. Many times, there was no need to observe the human heart using one's eyes. He was but a young boy, yet he was already as calm and composed as an experienced adult. This made him appear mature beyond his years, but also inevitably dull and boring. At the same time, he could also be accused of being shrewd and calculating for his age. This was perhaps a common feeling among other people, but Julien didn't hold the same opinion. Qian Pingyan was always kind to other people, yet he gave Julien a vague and slightly different feeling, as if there was the shadow of a sinister flood dragon lurking in the depths of his calm mind. However, this flood dragon that no one else knew about was most likely bound tight by rules and regulations as well as the notions of good and evil. As a result, the flood dragon couldn't rise to the surface of the water and stick its head out even if it wanted to. Julien didn't dare to speculate about anything else, and he could only confirm one thing. There were definitely 1 or 2 extremely deep-rooted attachments in the depths of Qian Pingyan's heart that he couldn't let go of. The city god was exhausted after traveling hundreds of kilometers to rush over here to break up the fight. This left him in a foul mood, and he felt a strong urge to flatten the river guardian temple and the mountain god temple with a single stomp. The mountain god and the river guardian crossing the boundary without permission was an extremely sensitive matter. Once their actions were reported to the Ministry of Rights in the capital, he would also suffer severe punishment as the city god of the nearby provincial city. He had remained in his territory and done nothing wrong, yet the wanton actions of the 2 foolish deities had rained sudden disaster upon him. After shooing the 2 trembling bastards away and telling them to piss off back home, the city god noticed Yao Zhan and the others standing in the distance. He channeled his qi observing technique to examine them, yet he was immediately astounded by the blinding radiance that he saw. The city god wanted to descend to the ground to further observe these people, yet the group of people was surprisingly haughty and arrogant, with 2 cultivators directly drawing their sabers and pointing them at him. They warned him against coming any closer, or else they would treat him as an assassin who harbored ill intentions. The city god was so enraged that he almost shouted for his 2 subordinate deities to come back. Fortunately, he was able to control himself thanks to the nourishment from the incense offerings that he had enjoyed for hundreds of years. In the end, he simply committed the faces of these strangers to memory. His expression was extremely dark as he returned to the provincial city. While returning to the main convoy, Yao Zhan walked over to Yao Jinji and asked in a quiet voice, "Why were you so cold and unreasonable? Interacting with other officials and drinking with them is inevitable while we travel to the capital," Yao Jinji replied in a slightly exasperated voice. "However, things will become much murkier if they pertain to the city god and other deities. Grandpa, you don't want to be secretly impeached by the imperial censors before you even arrive in Mirage City, do you? Even if the emperor treats this as nothing more than a joke, it will still send waves through the imperial court and the common people in the capital. Who in the world doesn't enjoy some good drama? In fact, didn't we just walk to the mountains to enjoy some drama? Did we truly care about who was in the right between the mountain god and the river guardian?" Yao Zhan immediately understood the implications after hearing Yao Jinji's explanation. He nodded in sincere agreement. The old general sighed in pity in his mind. Just how good would it have been if Yao Jinji were a male? That way, he could have left her at the border region and felt much more at ease. Pei Qian gathered a large pile of fish, yet Qian Pingyan was surprisingly unwilling to take any of them. Thus, she had no option but to grab their tails and forcefully toss them back into the river. This was a tiring job that left her drenched in sweat. After traveling for a while, they arrived at Riding Crane City, which was both a provincial city and a prefectural city. They were only a step away from reaching Mirage City, the capital of the Great Quan Empire. Riding Crane City had a long and colorful history, and the name of this city originated from a famous legend that described a powerful cultivator riding a crane and ascending from this city. There was a small mountain inside Riding Crane City, and the scenery of this mountain was normal and unspectacular. However, countless scholars and literati visited this mountain every year simply because it was the location of that powerful cultivator's ascension. Meanwhile, the small mountain was also surrounded by private residences designed and built by wealthy nobles from the capital. Each inch of land was worth its weight in gold. The city god whom they had encountered just then had most likely come from this provincial city. However, Yao Zhan didn't need to fear a city god from a provincial city. The head minister of rites was responsible for managing the appointment, promotion, and demotion of city gods in the empire, and the rank and salary of this position were almost identical to that of the head minister of war. Moreover, the Great Quan Empire was a nation where martial arts were extremely widespread, so the position of head minister of war wasn't some kind of unimportant position with no influence. Otherwise, the old generals nearing retirement age wouldn't have coveted this position so much. Just like before, they stayed in a relay station in the provincial city. This was due to the rules established by the imperial court. The relay station in the city was extremely large, surprisingly no smaller than the residence of a high-ranking official. In order to welcome Yao Zhan, trusted subordinates of the governor and the prefectural overseer made several trips to the relay station to almost completely clear it out. Since the two officials had already prepared everything in advance, Yao Zhan had no option but to accept their goodwill. At the same time, he acted as if he weren't aware of their help. If the water was too clear, there would be no fish. If a person was too critical, they would have no friends. This was especially the case in the officialdom. Generally speaking, the imperial court could tolerate loyal officials and treacherous officials. The imperial court could also make use of self-serving officials and fence-sitting officials. However, the imperial court was often unable to tolerate the existence of a moral sage. This was because such an official would be like a demon-exposing mirror hanging high above the imperial court, mercilessly exposing the flaws and blemishes of all pillar officials. Old General Yao couldn't help but sigh with emotion in his mind. His granddaughter Yao Jinji had explained these principles regarding how to interact with other people to him, while she was only 14 or 15 years old. There were times when Yao Zhan would chuckle in self-ridicule. He had lived for so long and accumulated so much experience, yet he had perhaps treated all of this as grass and fed them to the warhorses. Fortunately, Qian Ping'an was also in the convoy. Yao Zhan enjoyed chatting with this young boy during his trip to the north. According to their agreement, Qian Ping'an had a casual sparring session with Yao Xianji and gave him 1 or 2 tips. Yao Xianji treated Qian Ping'an's words as gospel, and he was overcome with sadness when he visited his grandpa and spoke his true thoughts. He claimed that he had practiced martial arts like a dog for all his life. Upon hearing this, Yao Zhan had asked him how many years all his life was. Perhaps it was dozens of years? This rendered Yao Xianji speechless. Yao Jinji was brewing tea nearby, and she chuckled in amusement when she heard this exchange. Even though she had failed to beat Liu Baixiang a single time in Go, she could definitely be regarded as a grandmaster when it came to brewing tea. The Yao clan had lived in the rough border regions for many generations, with both male descendants and female descendants practicing martial arts and displaying their might on the battlefield. That being the case, how had they raised such a talented and refined young lady? Big sister Jinji, I don't like that person called Xiao Yuan Ran. I like Qian Ping'an, Yao Xianji suddenly remarked for no apparent reason. Yao Jinji smiled faintly and replied, "What does it matter to me who you like or dislike?" Yao Xianji was just about to say something else, yet he immediately swallowed his words in fright when he saw Yao Jinji shooting a glare at him. Yao Zhan chuckled in a manner not befitting of the clan leader. "Grandpa, if everything goes according to plan, the imperial court will send a secret messenger to Riding Crane City very soon. It won't be too late for you to laugh at that time," Yao Jinji said in a calm and casual voice. Yao Zhan couldn't laugh anymore. Interacting with those scheming officials who had honed their skills in the imperial court for dozens of years was truly a headache-inducing task for the old general. Qian Ping'an practiced the 6-step walking meditation in his room. While doing so, he also closed his eyes and feigned holding a sword, visualizing the different demeanor of all those sword cultivators as they unleashed powerful sword strikes. There was a bamboo tube made from ordinary green bamboo on his table, and Qian Ping'an had casually harvested this bamboo from a bamboo forest on an azure mountain that they had passed on their trip. Qian Ping'an wanted to carve a brush holder as a farewell gift for old General Yao. Pei Qian ran over to his room and said that she wanted to wander around the city for a while, So Chen Ping'an told her to ask Lu Baixiang whether he was willing to accompany her around. If he wasn't, then she should obediently return to her room to study. Indeed, Chen Ping'an had already given her a second Confucian book not too long ago. However, Pei Qian had already memorized the entire book, and she had even run to Chen Ping'an's room in delight one time and claimed that she could genuinely recite the book in reverse. Chen Ping'an had grabbed the book and asked her to try, and Pei Qian had truly managed to recite the 1,000 or so characters in reverse without making a single mistake. Afterward, Chen Ping'an had twisted her ear and instructed her to return to her room to reflect on her mistake. Before letting her go, he had simply said, "I told you to study earnestly, so are you treating my words as a joke?" That time, Pei Qian had angrily stormed back to her own room and stood on the chair to peer down at that crappy book. Pinching her chin and furrowing her brows, she had thought to herself, study earnestly? What does this mean? Am I not studying earnestly enough? I studied for 15 entire minutes before I could recite this book in reverse. Pei Qian had then squatted down and looked at the name of the sage who had written this shitty book. "I'll remember you, old bastard. I'll definitely beat you up until you cry for your mom and dad once I master my sword technique and fist techniques." Afterward, she had stood up and mulled over Chen Ping'an's words for a long time. However, she had failed to make any progress, so she had eventually hopped off the chair and started to practice her wild staff technique with the hiking pole that had accompanied her for a long time. After randomly swinging the hiking pole around for a while, Pei Qian had tossed it away and felt like she was one step closer to becoming the most powerful martial artist in the world. This improved her mood greatly, and she had jumped into bed and fallen fast asleep. Upon hearing Chen Ping'an's response today, Pei Qian giddily ran away to look for Lu Baixiang, whom she had secretly nicknamed Little Bai. However, Lu Baixiang was surprisingly playing Go with Sui Yubian, so he asked the little girl to wait for an hour. Pei Qian turned around to look at Wei Xian, who was sitting there idly. He didn't understand Go at all, and he was simply waiting for the moment that victory was decided. Pei Qian was just about to say something, yet Wei Xian, whose eyes were still fixed on the Go board, suddenly said, "Let's go." He immediately stood up, after which Pei Qian came to a sudden realization. The two of them left the relay station to wander around the provincial city together. Pei Qian smiled and asked, "Old man Wei, did you bring any money with you?" Of Chen Ping'an's 4 subordinates, Pei Qian was the least afraid of Wei Xian. Moreover, Wei Xian would never get angry when she called him Old Man Wei. In reality, he couldn't care less about how Pei Qian referred to him. Wei Xian remained silent. "Then why the hell are we wandering around and shopping? We won't be able to buy any of the beautiful trinkets and delicious snacks that we come across," Pei Qian grumbled. "I have some silver," Wei Xian suddenly said. Pei Qian furrowed her brows and asked, "Where did you get it from? Did you steal it? Did you mug someone? Give me half and I won't tell Chen Ping'an. I taught the lame young boy at the border in a fist technique, and he repaid the favor by giving me some silver," Wei Xian replied. "I also taught Yao Xianji a fist stance recently, and I also got a dozen taels from that." A look of envy spread across Pei Qian's face and she remarked, "How impressive, Old Man Wei. You can make big money no matter where you go. I admire you for this." Pei Qian then clasped her hands behind her back, walking forward with her chest puffed out as she clicked her tongue and continued, "However, you actually went as far as to scam Little Lame? That's quite mean of you, Old Man Wei. Rather than scamming him, you should have scammed that lady called Jianyang instead. She was the truly wealthy one. Tiske, what a shame. Old Man Wei, your appearance isn't very likable, and you're nowhere near as young and handsome as my dad. Do you blame your mom and dad for making you so ugly?" The founding emperor of Southern Garden Nation was being utterly humiliated by a skinny little girl, yet he surprisingly managed to remain completely calm and unfazed. There was a stern expression on the short man's face as he replied, "When the imperial artists painted my portrait, they all praised my appearance as mighty and handsome. I feel like they were telling the truth and speaking from the bottom of their hearts." Pei Qian was stunned and she exclaimed, "Old Man Wei, are you stupid or what? Or perhaps those imperial artists had shit for eyes." Wei Xian fell silent again. There was no night curfew in Riding Crane City, and the countless wealthy individuals who lived here were all very willing to splash their money around. After leaving the relay station and walking out of the street, The middle-aged man and the little girl mingled together with the bustling crowd of people. Pei Qian didn't have a single copper coin in her pockets, yet she swaggered around as if she had thousands of taels of silver. This wasn't strange. After all, Pei Qian had managed to trick a large group of children the same age as her in Foxtown, somewhere completely new and unfamiliar to her. She had convinced the other children that she was a princess of the great Quan Empire drifting about and living an impoverished life in the common world. Afterward, she had even tricked the experienced guards and had them respectfully escort her back to the border inn. Old Man Wei, I have a nagging feeling that there's something strange about that woman's eyes when she looks at my dad. That woman who doesn't dare to show her face, Pei Qian suddenly said. 'Tis the mindset of an emperor, Wei Xian replied in an indifferent voice. Say what? Pei Qian asked in confusion. Wei Xian didn't say anything else. Pei Qian didn't dig any further, and she gulped and wiped the drool from the corner of her mouth. She smiled widely and asked, Old Man Wei, can you buy me some candy? Wei Xian shook his head in response. Why are you so stingy, Old Man Wei? Pei Qian exclaimed in anger. A rare smile appeared on Wei Xian's face as he replied, I'm nowhere near as capable and patient as Chan Ping'an. I'll never be able to raise you properly. Pei Qian was slightly confused, so she put on a pitiful expression and asked, Then I'll borrow some money from you to buy the candy? Wei Xian nodded and said, We'll set the interest at 3%. Pei Qian scrunched her face in disappointment and replied, Even though I know what 3% interest means, I feel like it's better to let this go. So be it if I can't buy the candy. It's not like I'll starve to death because of this. Even though she said this, she still ran to the craft candy stall like a gust of wind. After arriving in front of the stall, it was as if her feet had taken root in the ground and wouldn't budge anymore. She refused to leave no matter what. Wei Xian naturally couldn't abandon Pei Qian and leave by himself. If he dared to abandon Pei Qian, then Chan Ping'an would definitely treat him to a flurry of fists. The old man running the craft candy stall was extremely skilled at creating miniature figures from sugar, and there was a large group of little children crowding around his stall with drool hanging from their mouths. Those with adults accompanying them all received a candy person as per their wishes. Under the propped-up rectangular table was a round wooden cage that held a small bucket of coal. The old man used a large ladle to spread the piping hot golden sugar across the table, after which he would skillfully move the ladle around to quickly create all kinds of different candy people. Wei Xian took out some money to buy 2 candy people, causing Pei Qian to expectantly stare at his hands that were holding 1 candy person each. Wei Xian offered a candy person to Pei Qian and said, Here, I'll bestow this upon you. He was speaking as if he were an emperor bestowing a large plot of land to his subject. Pei Qian beamed with joy and exclaimed, I'll say good things about you in front of my dad every single day. I'm half a scholar now, so my words of praise will definitely be effective. Nibbling on their candy people, the middle-aged man and the skinny little girl didn't stand out at all among the bustling crowds of people. Inside the relay station, the game of Go had already come to an end. Sui Yubian had lost yet again. However, Sui Yubian wasn't determined to achieve victory when it came to playing Go. Lu Baixiang reviewed the game by himself. His eyes were firmly fixed on the Go board, and he pinched a spare Go piece with 2 fingers and placed it on the table before gently sliding it around. In a room not far away, Chan Ping'an was carving a bamboo tube, attempting to inscribe an entire sagely essay on the exterior of the tube. Chan Ping'an had already become adept at inscribing characters on bamboo slips during the past few years. In addition to this, he had also built a solid foundation from molding pottery and firing pottery during his childhood. Thus, even though he didn't dare to claim that his characters were energetic and lively, they were indeed straight and proper at the very least. The characters didn't appear overbearing, and they instead looked healthy and strong as they were inscribed into the bamboo. At the same time, the characters also seemed to possess vitality as long as a stream. At the end of the day, these characters were more than passable. Some people said that cultivators at the lower 5 tiers cultivated to extend their lifespan, while cultivators at the middle 5 tiers cultivated to seek immortality. As for cultivators at the upper 5 tiers, they were exploring the Great Tao by themselves at an even loftier and more distant place. There was almost no time for them to rest. Chan Ping'an didn't feel like there was anything wrong with this. Being busy and having a full schedule would imply not wasting his time and whiling away his days. Of course, it was still necessary to take an occasional break, slowing down or completely stopping to rest his mind and enjoy the scenery that accompanied the path of cultivation. Inscribing meaningful characters on the bamboo tube was an example of this, and personally carving a bamboo brush holder of little value according to his whims was also an example of this. Qian Ping'an burned the midnight oil to inscribe characters on more than half of the bamboo tube. He slept for 4 hours, then woke up and continued to practice walking meditation. Meanwhile, he kept practicing sword techniques using an imaginary sword. Winter was about to arrive. It was said that Mirage City looked like an immortal realm when covered in falling snow. Would he be fortunate enough to witness the first snowstorm of this year when arriving at the ferry station outside Mirage City? While eating breakfast, Qian Ping'an learned that the convoy of the Yao clan would rest in Riding Crane City for 2 days. He didn't pay much heed to this. Yao Xianji ran over to look for Qian Ping'an, saying that they were going to visit the renowned small mountain in the provincial city, the one where the immortal had ridden a crane and ascended from the world. The governor's manor had already informed the relay station that the small mountain would be tightly guarded and closed to the public today, regardless of whether old General Yao visited the mountain or not. After meeting up, Qian Ping'an discovered that quite a few of them were going to visit the small mountain today. There were Yao Zhan's 3 grandchildren, Taoist priest Xiao Yuanran, who was dressed in azure, and to his surprise Sui Yubian, who seldom showed herself. Wei Xian and Lu Baixiang chose to stay back at the relay station. Qian Ping'an found it slightly strange that old General Yao also chose to stay back. After all, Yao Zhan had been quite keen to go on sightseeing tours the entire time. Before setting off today, Qian Ping'an had already changed into golden sweet wine, which was now 1 grade higher than before. Thus, he appeared in front of the others in a white robe. If one were observant, one would also discover the white jade hairpin in Qian Ping'an's hair. Young men from the Great Li Empire in the north of the continent were naturally tall and sturdy. In fact, they were at least half a head taller than the young men from Old Dragon City in the south. Moreover, it was very normal for young men to marry and have children when they were 15 or 16. Only those from powerful clans or scholarly clans would adhere to customs and have coming-of-age ceremonies when their descendants turned 20. Qian Ping'an had continued to grow taller and taller after starting to practice fist techniques, and before he knew it, he already looked like a mature young man. Trailing behind him was the tanned and skinny Pei Qian. Pei Qian was less afraid of Zhu Lian while she was around Qian Ping'an. Qian Ping'an and the others made their way to the small mountain located in the middle of the provincial city. While passing by the martial sage temple, they came across a strange person and encountered a strange event. They saw a tall and sturdy young boy full of blood barge into the martial sage temple. However, it wasn't long before the young boy was captured by the temple attendant and other people and tossed out of the front gate. The Wenchang Pavilion and the martial sage temple of the provincial city were no place for random people to barge in and cause a ruckus. After being tossed out of the martial sage temple, the young boy furiously kowtowed at the temple, with his head banging loudly against the ground as he pleaded for something. The temple attendant was a tall and skinny elder, and he stood atop the steps leading to the entrance as he scolded the young boy with a stern expression, reprimanding him. How can I allow mere mortals to sully the saber held by the sage of the martial sage temple? Seeing that you're young and naive, I can let you off for barging into the temple. Now hurry up and leave. Rid yourself of those preposterous thoughts. As it turned out, this young boy had barged into the martial sage temple and attempted to borrow a saber from the sage. The young boy's forehead became red and swollen from kowtowing, and wisps of blood were already starting to become visible. He looked up with tears of despair streaming down his face, and he pleaded in a hoarse voice. My master has focused all of his effort on slaying demons and eliminating vermin for the sake of the common people in the prefecture. However, he's trapped in an illusion in the mountain forest and facing life-threatening danger now. After pushing me out of the illusion, Master told me that he would only have a chance at slaying that ferocious great demon that's wreaking havoc in the area if I managed to borrow the saber from the martial sage temple. I'm begging you, esteemed temple attendant. This is a good deed that will allow everyone to accumulate good karma. So I'm sure that the martial sage won't get angry because of this. The mighty and dignified-looking temple attendant chuckled coldly and retorted, What right do you have to dictate whether the martial sage will become angry or not? According to the laws of the Great Quan Empire, do you know the punishment for wantonly using the weapon of a martial sage without permission? The local officials and the county magistrate will be fired on the spot. The prefectural overseer will be demoted 1 rank, and the governor will lose their salary for 3 years. The young boy was filled with grief and anguish, and he murmured, "There are demons and fiends wreaking havoc in the area, and so be it if the officials turn a blind eye to this. Yet, even the martial sage is unwilling to help us now." The elderly temple attendant spoke in a stern manner and had a cold expression, yet in reality, he also heaved a soft sigh in his mind. "Young boy, do you really think that everything in the world is so simple?" Julien looked up and stole a glance at Qian Ping'an walking in front of him. Qian Ping'an was just about to raise his foot, yet Xiao Yuanran was already starting to stride over. Seeing this, Qian Ping'an silently stopped his movement. Xiao Yuanran walked over to the young boy and squatted down, asking, "Where is your master trapped? Do you know the cultivation base of the demon?" The young boy answered Xiao Yuanran's questions one by one. Xiao Yuanran reached over to help the young boy up. He then grabbed the young boy's shoulder and said with a faint smile, "I'll head over to rescue your master. I'll also help him slay the demon." Xiao Yuanran turned around to look at Yao Jinji, who was wearing her veiled hat again, and said in an apologetic voice, "Apologies, Miss Yao, but I'm afraid that I won't be able to go to the small mountain with you." Yao Jinji nodded lightly, with her expression largely hidden by her veiled hat. Xiao Yuanran grabbed the young boy and leaped into the air, landing on a distant roof before nimbly bounding away. It wasn't long before he vanished into the distance. A sense of admiration welled up in Yao Lingji's heart. The young girl with a saber by her waist now had a better impression of this young guest elder of the Great Quan Empire. Meanwhile, Pei Qian had been observing Xiao Yuanran with narrowed eyes the entire time. She cocked her head in speechlessness. Following this unexpected commotion, everyone was much less excited about their subsequent trip to the mountain. Moreover, the small mountain was genuinely far too small, and there was indeed nothing special about it at all. Only Sui Yubian, with her sword strapped to her back, stood on the peak of the small mountain and gazed up at the sky with a fervent expression. Apart from a slight sense of disappointment about the mediocre scenery of this small mountain, Qian Ping'an didn't display too many other emotions. Whether it was the mountain god diving into a river, the river guardian charging onto a mountain, or the young boy attempting to borrow a saber from the martial sage temple, these events were ultimately nothing more than small and unremarkable splashes in a vast ocean. However, Great Subduing Academy joining forces with the sect leader of Peace and Tranquility Mountain to prevent the 12th tier Great Demon from entering the sea and fleeing was a rather major matter. Zhong Kuei going to Peace and Tranquility Mountain to help out wasn't a small matter either. Apart from the 2 other noble scholars, 3 virtuous scholars, and more than 20 disciples from Great Subduing Academy, Literary Profundity Academy, which was located further south, dispatched even more scholars to help Peace and Tranquility Mountain. There were more than 50 scholars from Literary Profundity Academy, although sadly, only a single elderly noble scholar. The cultivation bases of the remaining scholars were far inferior compared to the scholars from Great Subduing Academy. This was the awkward dilemma faced by Literary Profundity Academy. This academy had little renown, and it produced the smallest number of talented scholars out of the 4 Confucian academies in Parasol Leaf Continent. There were many rumors swirling around in the mountains, and it was often speculated that Literary Profundity Academy was going to lose its status as one of the 72 Confucian academies, especially since a new noble scholar hadn't appeared in almost 100 years. Not only that, but the Mountain Master and the 2 Deputy Mountain Masters had few scholarly articles that were renowned and worth a read. When people visited Literary Profundity Academy, they weren't going there to visit the Mountain Master or the scholars. Instead, they were going there to visit the Belvedere of Literary Profundity that housed countless books. 1. After arriving at Peace and Tranquility Mountain, Zhong Kuei followed his teacher's instructions and asked the scholars from Great Subduing Academy to follow the instructions of the Taoist priests from Peace and Tranquility Mountain. He asked them not to act of their own accord. Even though disastrous events were taking place everywhere, the Taoist priests in Peace and Tranquility Mountain didn't become flustered no matter their age or seniority. They held discussions and made decisions in an orderly manner, and group after group of chi refiners left the mountain to encircle and slay demons in many different areas. These qi refiners naturally suffered injuries and death, and many of those who died were Taoist priests from Peace and Tranquility Mountain. This caused the two Confucian academies and the many qi refiners from the various immortal forces and clans to feel a deep sense of respect. At the same time, these reinforcements also became increasingly sincere and cooperative. When resting between the intense battles, the cultivators who had come from all over the continent would often have spirited discussions with each other. During these conversations, the person mentioned the most was naturally that errand boy from planchette writing sect who had shot to fame in a single night. He had initially been an external disciple, and it was rumored that the sect leader of planchette writing sect had already taken him as his final disciple. Not only that, but the sect leader had even bestowed upon him a pseudo-celestial tool that his late Tao partner had refined for more than 100 years. If it weren't for this young boy uncovering the schemes of that 12th-tier great demon and forcing it to act earlier than planned, the consequences would have been absolutely unimaginable. During the past 10 days, demons remained hidden in various places started to pop up one after another, wantonly wreaking havoc and causing complete chaos. Moreover, most of these demons were at the Dragon Gate tier or Golden Core tier, making them extremely difficult to encircle and kill. Peace and Tranquility Mountain didn't dare to be careless and let their guard down. Regardless of whether it was Taoist priests from Peace and Tranquility Mountain or like-minded cultivators who had traveled over to help, almost everyone was dispatched to the various locations to subdue the ravaging demons. Only noble scholar Zhong Kuei chose to remain in Peace and Tranquility Mountain. However, no one had any complaints about this. After all, Zhong Kuei had killed the most demons during their previous patrols around the area. In addition to this, Zhong Kuei hadn't focused on protecting just the disciples from Great Subduing Academy. Rather, there were several times when he had actively joined the groups of cultivators from other forces and clans, assisting them as they fought to the death with the violent demons. Thus, before leaving the mountain, the nascent tier Earth Immortal from Peace and Tranquility Mountain, who had initially been responsible for managing the situation, smiled at Zhong Kuei and said that he would temporarily hand the mountain to Mr. Zhong. The nascent tier Earth Immortal also revealed a secret to Zhong Kuei, telling him that the old ancestor of Peace and Tranquility Mountain would return very soon. Perhaps the old ancestor would bring Taoist Nun Huangting back from the Lotus Flower-blessed land as well. Zhong Kuei laughed heartily and remarked that it would be great if the old ancestor could return as soon as possible. That way, he wouldn't need to keep an eye on that well prison every single day. After the nascent tier Earth Immortal left, Zhong Kuei started to patrol the bottom level of the well prison by himself every day. Late one night, Zhong Kuei had just walked out from the well prison when he saw an individual whom he had heard the renown of, yet had never had the opportunity to meet before. This individual was a great demon. In reality, to say nothing of an outsider like Zhong Kuei, many senior Taoist priests from Peace and Tranquility Mountain had never seen this great demon either. This was the case even though the great demon lived and cultivated in Peace and Tranquility Mountain. This great demon was Bai Yuan, a sword-carrying white ape dressed in black robes. Bai Yuan was as tall as a grown man, and had an extremely high cultivation base. However, it didn't assume human form, and it instead chose to maintain its original appearance as a white ape. Even though the old ape was a great demon extremely renowned throughout Parasol Leaf Continent, it was also a guest elder of Peace and Tranquility Mountain at the same time. To say nothing of how long Bai Yuan had cultivated before joining the sect, he had already guarded Peace and Tranquility Mountain for more than 3,000 years. In fact, Bai Yuan was even older than the only surviving old ancestor of Peace and Tranquility Mountain traveling around in the outside world right now. The founder of Peace and Tranquility Mountain had spent a mountain of fortune to build the well prison, yet throughout the long passage of time, he had left the responsibility of guarding this prison to Bai Yuan, the white ape who seldom showed himself and liked to carry a sword on his back. On the rare occasion that a great demon escaped from the well prison, it was always Bai Yuan who would personally pursue and capture them. He had never allowed a single demon to flee, and would always complete his duty with absolute perfection. In fact, the matters were dealt with so swiftly that many Earth Immortals in Peace and Tranquility Mountain weren't even aware of their occurrence. When this calamity broke out, Bai Yuan had been cultivating in seclusion and attempting to advance from the unpolished Jade tier to the Immortal tier. Unexpectedly, however, Bai Yuan had exited seclusion after just 5 years or so. Perhaps he had sensed the unrest in the outside world, so he had been forced to conclude his cultivation earlier than he wanted. The autumn wind was biting, and the mountain forest was silent. Even though Bai Yuan was simply standing there, he still appeared as majestic and domineering as a mountain. Meanwhile, Zhong Kuei was wearing the same azure robe that he had worn in the inn near the border of the Great Quan Empire. "It was you, wasn't it?" The sword-carrying white ape didn't say anything. The ray of sword chi soaring from his back was his answer. During the journey of life, one would inevitably face a few thunderstorms and heavy downpours. It was as if the heavens were reminding people that they were powerless and subject to the whims of a higher entity, so they needed to bow their heads and remain obedient. For example, Qian Ping'an encountered Kai Jinjian in front of his own home in Clay Vase Alley. Afterward he faced off against the elderly Golden Flood Dragon in the Flood Dragon Trench, the original owner of Golden Sweet Wine. He then wandered into the depths of the Lotus Flower-blessed land by accident, where he was hunted by a group of martial arts grandmasters. The heavens threw him many challenges, and it was up to him whether he could overcome them or not. If he overcame these challenges, then the rain would clear to reveal the glorious sun. If he failed to overcome these challenges, however, then he could only act like those defeated martial artists. He could only shout at the sky and promise that he would definitely become stronger in a decade or two. One's master could only teach one the basics, and it was up to one's talent and hard work to decide how far one could eventually go. This was the situation that Zhong Kuei was facing today. The heavens were unleashing a thunderstorm upon him. Before today, the noble scholar from Great Subduing Academy had cultivated far too quickly and far too well. His cultivation speed was simply astonishing, and he had shot forward on the path of the Great Tao and left everyone else to eat dust. In fact, the Confucian disciples in Parasol Leaf Continent could barely catch a glimpse of his back. Today, however, Bai Yuan had appeared in front of him. This sword-carrying white ape was a mortal enemy. The current situation was exactly what Zhong Kuei's teacher had wanted to avoid. Namely, a situation where Zhong Kuei faced certain death. There was apathy in Bai Yuan's eyes as he looked at the young noble scholar, someone who had the talent to become the mountain master of a Confucian school. Zhong Kuei took a deep breath. Even though Bai Yuan hadn't broken through to the immortal tier, and he wasn't the kind of great demon renowned for having an innately powerful physique, he was still a profoundly powerful sword cultivator at the unpolished jade tier. If chi refiners were viewed as the most rebellious thieves in the world who dared to challenge the predetermined cycle of life and death maintained by the heavenly Tao, then sword cultivators would undoubtedly be viewed as the most unreasonably rebellious thieves out of them all. Noble people wouldn't remove their jade pendants for no reason. However, Bai Yuan's first strike after unsheathing, his sword immediately shattered Zhong Kuei's protective jade pendant into smithereens. This was a jade pendant given to every noble scholar in Great Subduing Academy. After the jade pendant that contained the true intent of sagely Confucian essays crumbled between the great demon and the noble scholar, hundreds of golden characters slowly dissipated from the world, appearing like golden raindrops as they gradually evaporated into the air. Zhong Kuei instantly shot back in retreat, arriving near the perimeter of the well prison located more than 30 meters away. His azure sleeves billowed in the murderous autumn wind, and they were quickly filled with a mighty and indomitable aura. The so-called well prison in Peace and Tranquility Mountain was a gigantic structure that looked like a well. There was a spiral staircase carved into the inside wall of the well, leading further and further down into the cold and eerie depths. It was as if the gigantic well were a bottomless pit that led directly to the netherworld. In fact, cultivators at the lower 5 tiers would suffer detrimental consequences if they dared to approach the well prison. Their aura would become chaotic, and the murderous aura that had accumulated in the well prison for countless years would gradually corrode their physiques. There was a type of challenging cultivation for junior Taoist priests in Peace and Tranquility Mountain, and this cultivation method involved meditating near the well prison to temper one's physique. This was an indescribably painful process. Taoist nun Huang Ting was viewed as a prodigious cultivation talent because of her performance when she had followed her fellow sect disciples to the well prison for the first time. While everyone else was bitterly struggling to prevent the murderous aura from entering their acupoints, Huang Ting sat there completely unfazed and unaffected. Not only that, but Huang Ting quietly sneaked to the entrance of the well prison as well. If it weren't for the senior Taoist priest who was responsible for keeping an eye on the junior Taoist priests hurriedly rushing over to grab the little girl by the collar, Huang Ting might well have entered the well prison for the first time at just 9 years old. Afterward, Huang Ting continued to have battles of wits and courage with her seniors at Peace and Tranquility Mountain. In the end, she finally managed to sneak into the well prison when she was 11 years old. However, she almost died in the depths of the well prison, unable to venture further down yet also unable to climb back up. She lost her consciousness after becoming trapped. In the end, it was a white ape in black robes that tossed her out of the well prison. Bai Yuan slowly walked forward, and appeared like he was taking a casual stroll as he arrived on the opposite side of the well prison. The sword chi of his ancient sword was far too powerful, so much so that it completely concealed the true appearance of the sword. After shattering Zhong Kuei's jade pendant, which was equivalent to a high-grade immortal treasure, with a single strike, Bai Yuan's flying sword was actually no longer in Peace and Tranquility Mountain. Peering into the distance, one could vaguely see a streak of white light shooting into the distance like a slender white snake nimbly slithering across a black screen. Because of this, the mountain protection formation of Peace and Tranquility Mountain, which was just about to activate, instantly ground to a halt. Not only that, but it also became abnormally chaotic. Zhong Kuei was surprisingly unable to activate the mountain protection formation to suppress the great demon. The old ancestor of Peace and Tranquility Mountain had gone to the Lotus Flower-blessed land to bring Huang Ting back. The sect leader had gone to Planchette Writing Sect to block the 12th tier Great Demon, and the nascent tier Earth Immortal responsible for managing affairs in Peace and Tranquility Mountain had also left the mountain to deal with other matters. Before leaving, the nascent tier Earth Immortal had given control of the mountain protection formation to Zhong Kuei, an outsider, without any hesitation. This wasn't because Zhong Kuei was a noble scholar from Great Subduing Academy, but simply because he trusted Zhong Kuei. In reality, the nascent tier Earth Immortal could be accused of overstepping his authority by doing this, since it was extremely likely that the biggest secrets of Peace and Tranquility Mountain would be revealed to Zhong Kuei as well. However, no one in Peace and Tranquility Mountain questioned this decision. Once upon a time, a sage had remarked that Taoist priests from Peace and Tranquility Mountain possessed a gallant and chivalrous aura. Considering the situation right now, they indeed lived up to these beautiful words of praise. However, it was often the case that the demonic forces were one step ahead. As expected of a guest elder, who had guarded Peace and Tranquility Mountain for 3,000 years, Bai Yuan was surprisingly able to bring the mountain protection formation to a temporary stop. A solemn expression appeared on Zhong Kuei's face as he silently recited a sagely essay in his mind. The autumn wind in his azure sleeves was even higher grade than the incredibly rare book-flipping wind. Zhong Kuei had become a virtuous scholar in Great Subduing Academy before the age of 20, yet his unrestrained behavior during that period had left him with a tattered reputation in the academy. He was disliked by many stubborn and pedantic old scholars. In fact, he would have lost his title of virtuous scholar very early on if it weren't for the mountain master standing up for him in an almost doting manner. One had to realize that becoming a virtuous scholar or a noble scholar wasn't a once-and-done kind of process. Rather, virtuous scholars and noble scholars needed to take an important exam once every few years. However, Zhong Kuei had become dead drunk and passed out for 3 entire days, completely missing his exam. Among the elderly scholars in Great Subduing Academy, some were unable to stand Zhong Kuei's carefree and unrestrained nature, some felt enraged by how he was wasting his talent, and some were of the belief that one needed to face significant challenges if one wanted to achieve great things in the future. Thus, all of the virtuous scholars and noble scholars had written a joint letter to the mountain master, requesting that he strip Zhong Kuei of his title as a virtuous scholar. That was a snowy winter day, and Zhong Kuei walked through the snow barefoot while loudly reciting the essays of some sage. He looked very haughty and unrestrained as he tread the snow, looking up at the sky and asking that sage for clarifications about his essay. In the end, he answered his own questions with a very self-satisfied expression. Before Zhong Kuei stopped walking, a gust of autumn wind surprisingly appeared even though it was the middle of winter, carrying with it the personal praise and approval of that sage. The words "very good" echoed throughout the entire Great Subduing Academy. The gust of autumn wind entered his sleeves. On that day, Zhong Kuei was promoted to the position of noble scholar. No one had dared to question this. Legend said that the creation of written characters by sages had caused ghosts to sob and spirits to weep. 2. Indeed, written characters possessed immense power. At the very least, this was most certainly the case for scholarly disciples in Confucian academies. The kindred characters of sages from the so-called temples of decorum were the epitome display of the power of written characters. These powerful sages had been enshrined and worshipped in the Confucian temples for countless years, and they were enjoying eternal incense offerings while their scholarly lineages also remained healthy. However, even sages enshrined and worshipped in the temples of decorum only possessed a single kindred character. Of course, this was disregarding the paramount sage who was placed on the central altar as well as the 5 sages who were placed to his left and right. In fact, only 4 of them remained now. There was only a single exception in the world. Mountain Cliff Academy's Qi Jing Chun. He possessed 2 kindred characters, Chun and Jing. Moreover, these 2 characters were extremely profound and powerful. Ranked below the kindred characters of sages were the spoken words of mountain masters from the Confucian academies. Their words contained the decree of the heavens, and their aura of righteousness could attract resonance with heaven and earth. Ranked further below this were the poems and literary works of virtuous scholars and the others. These poems and literary works could summon astral winds that possessed the power to reduce one to a rack of bones. In fact, these astral winds could directly destroy the souls of ghosts and entities. With an empty sword scabbard on his back, Bai Yuan stood far away on the opposite side of the well prison. He didn't say anything and he simply raised 3 fingers. Perhaps he was saying that he would only need 3 sword strikes to kill Zhong Kuei? Zhong Kuei remained silent, not engaging in a war of words with Bai Yuan. His jade pendant, which signified his status as a noble scholar of great subduing academy, had already relayed his current situation back to the academy. Numerous snow-white waterfalls appeared all around Zhong Kuei, and looking closely, one could see that the brilliant curtains of water were actually made up of countless tiny and dazzling characters. It was as if gigantic pages of characters had been erected beside the well prison in Peace and Tranquility Mountain. So powerful were these pages of characters that even the murderous aura rising from the well prison was forcefully pushed down, suppressing the demons and ghosts that were imprisoned within. This caused the demons and ghosts to howl in rage. The sound of countless iron chains violently thrashing around in the bottom of the well prison boomed like explosive thunder. Bai Yuan looked around. The mountain protection formation of Peace and Tranquility Mountain was actually split into 2, an internal part and an external part. One was known while one was concealed. The formation that Zhong Kuei had attempted to activate moments before was the public one that the entire Parasol Leaf continent was aware of. Once this formation was successfully activated, a mirror would rise into the sky like the bright moon, shining radiance upon Peace and Tranquility Mountain, and giving the demons and ghosts no place to hide or escape. Not only would their cultivation bases be suppressed by the radiance, but demons and ghosts would suffer further detrimental effects due to their innate weakness against the righteous radiance. Demons and ghosts that were slightly weaker, for example those below the level of Earth Immortal, would be instantly killed by this radiance. However, what Bai Yuan was truly afraid of wasn't this unhidden formation that he had already tampered with. Rather, he was afraid of Peace and Tranquility Mountain's true trump card. The radiant moon formation was powerful enough to awe and frighten half of the continent, yet outsiders would be unable to fathom its true purpose no matter how much they racked their brains. In reality, this formation was simply created to allow Peace and Tranquility Mountain to more easily identify their opponents. This was all there was to it. Which sect in Parasol Leaf Continent ranked 3rd after Parasol Leaf Sect and Jade Tablet Sect? For the past 1,000 or so years, there was a general consensus among cultivators in Parasol Leaf Continent that Planchette Writing Sect, with its sect leaders being Tao partners at the upper 5 tiers, should rank 3rd. However, regardless of how people extolled the greatness of Planchette Writing Sect, and sincerely believed in its might, Planchette Writing Sect had never accepted these claims that it was the 3rd most powerful sect in Parasol Leaf Continent. Regarding these debates, the sect leader of Planchette Writing Sect had always avoided making comments. He only made a related remark one single time, smiling and saying that if Planchette Writing Sect moved to that small continent in the north, would it pose any challenge at all to fight for first? The streak of white light swimming around outside the territory of Peace and Tranquility Mountain once again pierced through the formless barrier around the sect, shooting over at an incredible speed and directly piercing down at Zhong Kuei's head from the sky. The numerous pages of characters that looked like waterfalls started to flow in reverse, forming a large and snow-white hemispherical barrier that completely enveloped Zhong Kuei. The formidable might of the sword strike was slightly weakened, yet the aura of righteousness contained within Zhong Kuei's barrier also dissipated at a rapid rate. In fact, just the measly sparks from this collision were able to severely damage the towering ancient tree near the well prison, the viewing pavilion, and the cave abode where esteemed immortals cultivated. Countless birds and animals howled in anguish as they fled. Zhong Kuei paid no heed to the ancient sword that would inevitably shatter his waterfall barrier at some point in time. Instead, he stared intently at the white ape that was standing there in a calm and indomitable manner. Bai Yuan appeared calm and composed, and there was even a hint of amusement and eager expectation on his face. It was clear that he wanted to see whether this noble scholar from Great Subduing Academy, whom he definitely had to kill, had any other trump cards up his sleeves. The ancient sword piercing down at Zhong Kuei's head had only been his second sword strike. It was innately difficult for demons to cultivate, and becoming a sword cultivator was even more prohibitively difficult. Thus, demons who managed to become sword cultivators at the upper 5 tiers could undoubtedly become powerful rulers of a territory in Savage World. Meanwhile, demon sword cultivators at the middle 5 tiers would also enjoy all kinds of benefits and special treatment. Their status could be paralleled with that of scholarly disciples in Majestic World's Confucian academies. Demon sword cultivators at the middle 5 tiers could be spared from capital punishment a single time, even if they wantonly killed someone for revenge or attacked someone for no good reason. On the other hand, those who broke the rules and wantonly killed demon sword cultivators would suffer severe punishment if they were caught, regardless of how lofty their status was. Qi refiners from Majestic World were perhaps still unclear about just how terrifying great demon sword cultivators were. After all, there were countless demons, fiends, and spirits in the world, yet there were very few truly powerful great demons. However, the situation at the Sword Qi Great Wall was different, and the heroic deaths of countless human sword cultivators at the hands of great demon sword cultivators had already taught them about the terrifying destructive power and bloodthirsty nature of these foes. What made Aoyang so powerful? Why did he have so many admirers and supporters at the Sword Qi Great Wall? This was because Aoyang had tempered his sword Dao at the Sword Qi Great Wall for 100 years, and he had remained undefeated against upper 5-tier great demon sword cultivators of similar cultivation. Not only that, but Aoyang had even pursued and hunted his enemies for tens of thousands of kilometers. In fact, he had even managed to slay a few great demon sword cultivators at the upper 5 tiers. Now that Aoyang had ascended from Majestic World and gone to engage in an intense fight with the Daoist second disciple in that strange place where heavenly demon ran amok, Qi refiners from Majestic World all felt like Aoyang would experience glory even if he was defeated. In stark contrast, the large majority of demons from Savage World were convinced that Aoyang, who deserved to die 10,000 times over, would rival true invincible and cause the Daoist second disciple to become false invincible. The demon tribe respected and revered powerful individuals, and this was the case even though they detested Aoyang to the core. Indeed, when a paramount great demon suggested that Aoyang be granted a sword tombstone at his grave in Savage World after he was slain, the entire Savage World, a place that Majestic World viewed as a land of wildlings, surprisingly accepted this suggestion with no objections. The demons regarded this as completely reasonable. The 100 or so Daoist priests who had stayed back in Peace and Tranquility Mountain didn't stand there idly. Almost all of them were the most junior-ranking disciples in the sect, and many of them were young Daoist priests who had already gone as pale as a sheet. However, their expressions remained determined and staunch. "Get away from here. Don't seek death," Zhong Kuei instructed in a stern voice. Even though an elderly golden core tier cultivator from Peace and Tranquility Mountain had already recognized Bai Yuan, he still retorted at Zhong Kuei's reasoning and said, "Daoist priests from Peace and Tranquility Mountain are responsible for slaying demons and eliminating fiends. We won't stand idly by and watch an outsider die in front of us." Bai Yuan didn't so much as glance at the elderly golden core tier cultivator. He threw a casual punch, and his fist aura instantly obliterated the Earth Immortal and completely destroyed his golden core. The elderly golden core tier cultivator had repaid goodwill with goodwill. Thus he had no regrets even though he was brutally killed. This was the mindset of Taoist priests from Peace and Tranquility Mountain. This was also the mindset of Zhong Kuei. With a flick of his sleeves, the two wisps of azure wind flowed out from his azure sleeves and enveloped the Taoist priests from Peace and Tranquility Mountain, tossing them to someplace far away. Bai Yuan paid no heed to this, tacitly allowing Zhong Kuei to remove the Taoist priests from the battlefield. Zhong Kuei alone was indeed comparable in value to Peace and Tranquility Mountain. With a single thought, Bai Yuan caused his ancient sword to pierce down even faster. Zhong Kuei quietly grabbed an azure-colored talisman with 2 fingers. Using the wind and snow all that had the characters, writing as if assisted by the gods inscribed on it, Zhong Kuei had drawn his self-created sword-suppressing talisman on this sagely talisman paper. The azure-colored sword-suppressing talisman appeared above Zhong Kuei's head the moment that Bai Yuan's sword pierced through the semi-spherical formation of waterfalls. Like an otherworldly immortal plummeting into a blessed land, Bai Yuan's ancient sword surprisingly vanished without a trace. Even Bai Yuan, who had refined the ancient sword for more than 1,000 years, was unable to detect its presence. The 2 large mountain protection formations of Peace and Tranquility Mountain were like brilliant moons rising into the sky. They were like radiant mirrors that could illuminate the world, detecting demons and exposing fiends. In fact, these formations could even trap unpolished jade-tier cultivators for a brief moment. The true killing blow would quickly follow, and this would be delivered by the 4 replica ancient immortal swords that the divinely powerful founder of Peace and Tranquility Mountain had exhausted his wealth and effort to create. Even though they were replicas, each ancient immortal sword was a pseudo-celestial tool. Once the 4 swords entered formation, their might would become even greater, allowing them to rival genuine celestial tools. The ancient sword that Bai Yuan had carried on his back was coincidentally one of these 4 swords. As a guest elder of Peace and Tranquility Mountain, he had done more than just pursue the great demon escapees from the well prison during the past 3,000 years. In addition to this, he had also left the mountains in secret to kill enemies countless times. He had achieved many feats and provided meritorious service. In the end, against much opposition, the sect leader of the generation 1,000 years ago had bestowed one of the 4 ancient swords to the white ape for his unparalleled merit. Even though Bai Yuan was unable to fully control the formation formed by the 4 ancient swords, manipulating it for a brief moment was far too easy. If an ordinary Earth Immortal were forced to channel and maintain the formation in a hurry, then Bai Yuan was confident that he could even wrest control of the formation. After losing the ancient sword that was also his bonded item, Bai Yuan narrowed his eyes and pursed his lips. His movements were subtle, yet they were filled with overwhelming arrogance and bloodthirst. Zhong Kuei placed one hand behind his back and held the wind and snow all in his other hand, and he started to write the first character in the air as if he were standing in front of a desk. Zhong Kuei wrote these 4 characters extremely quickly. Each character written by the wind and snow all hovered in front of Zhong Kuei and radiated with a boundless aura. Winds howled and clouds swirled above Peace and Tranquility Mountain. Bai Yuan lightly shook his head. He then vanished in a flash, with his arms trailing behind him as if he were holding 2 heavy blades. Bai Yuan leaped over the entrance of the well prison and directly charged at Zhong Kuei. He swung his arms horizontally. He didn't want to give the young noble scholar from Great Subduing Academy any chance at all. This was not to say that Bai Yuan would be helpless if he allowed Zhong Kuei to finish writing the sagely essay. After all, he had in fact immediately reached the immortal tier upon entering seclusion. He had plotted carefully and suppressed his cultivation base for half a millennium. There was the unpolished jade tier between Zhong Kuei and Bai Yuan, and naturally the insurmountable gulf between the middle 5 tiers and the upper 5 tiers. Thus, unless Zhong Kuei was the reincarnation of the Tao ancestor or Buddha, how could he, a nascent tier noble scholar, possibly survive? Of course, it would be a different matter altogether if Zhong Kuei could control the 2 mountain protection formations of Peace and Tranquility Mountain at the same time. Sadly, Bai Yuan could completely ignore these formations unless they were personally controlled by the sect leader, or the old ancestor of Peace and Tranquility Mountain. In any case, things would genuinely become very troublesome if Bai Yuan remained in Peace and Tranquility Mountain for too long. When Bai Yuan gently landed in the location where Zhong Kuei had been standing a moment ago, the two halves of Zhong Kuei's severed body were already lying in a pool of blood more than 30 meters away. He had been cleaved into two at the waist. The four golden characters and the wind and snow all had also been obliterated. Zhong Kuei's magnificent and righteous golden core no longer existed, and his incredibly high-grade nascent soul also vanished from the world. This was the consequence of being struck by the full-power attack of a 12th-tier sword cultivator. Bai Yuan raised his hand and made a grabbing motion, pulling the azure-colored talisman already riddled with tears from the void. He rubbed the talisman between his fingers, allowing the ancient sword to break free from its restrictions. Bai Yuan then grabbed the hilt of the ancient sword and returned it to the scabbard on his back. Bai Yuan took a glance at Zhong Kuei, the noble scholar in azure who couldn't be saved even if a powerful immortal were present. He finally spoke for the first time, and his voice was hoarse and unhurried as he said, "You can consider this a heroic and righteous death." The white ape looked up and gazed into the distance before stomping his feet, and causing the entire Peace and Tranquility Mountain to shudder. With a single leap, he arrived at the peak of Peace and Tranquility Mountain. With a twist and a bound, he then rapidly shot toward the south. Following the violent shudder, it was as if the restrictions were completely lifted from the bottom of the well prison, with an overwhelming murderous aura suffusing through the well prison and exploding into the surroundings. After being suppressed in the well prison for countless years, the imprisoned demons experienced a momentary sense of shock and confusion before bellowing with laughter. The sinister demons and fiends were just about to charge out of the well prison and massacre the cultivators of Peace and Tranquility Mountain. However, their astonishingly sinister and bloodthirsty aura suddenly faltered at this moment, becoming hesitant and indecisive. As it turned out, a speck of light had appeared to the north of Peace and Tranquility Mountain, someplace extremely far away. This was followed by the relentless rumble of thunder and lightning that tore the seas of clouds to shreds. The mountain shuddered again, and a tall and sturdy old man in Taoist robes and with gray hair landed beside Zhong Kuei's corpse, his face filled with guilt, grief, and indignation. A golden Tao manifestation rose from the ground and became almost as tall as Peace and Tranquility Mountain that towered into the sky. Raising his arm, the colossal Tao manifestation of the old Taoist priest summoned a moon-like jade plate from the mountain and grabbed it in his hands, using it to unleash a ray of light toward the south. At the same time, he flicked his sleeve and caused 3 bursts of sword light to rise from the south, east, and west of Peace and Tranquility Mountain. 3 ancient swords flew over, hovering around his golden Tao manifestation. The Taoist priest was none other than the old ancestor of Peace and Tranquility Mountain. Back then, the old Taoist priest's senior brother had insisted on bestowing one of the 4 ancient immortal swords to Bai Yuan, and he had opposed this decision the most vehemently. Because of this, the relationship between the two of them had been ruined, and they ended up treating each other as strangers. Not only that, but an outsider with the same seniority as him and his senior brother had taken things even further, publicly accusing him of being jealous of a demonic beast's fated opportunity. The immortal tier old ancestor of Peace and Tranquility Mountain held the radiant jade mirror in his hand, a mirror that looked like it could rival the bright moon in the sky. After searching for a moment, he finally found the white ape that had already fled many kilometers into the distance. The voice of the golden Tao manifestation boomed like thunder, roaring, "Ungrateful beast! I'm going to hack you into 10,000 pieces." The words that he uttered were like laws that would be upheld. The 3 ancient immortal swords of Peace and Tranquility Mountain formed 3 dazzling streaks of light that illuminated the surroundings thousands of kilometers as they shot through the sky and pursued Bai Yuan, who was fleeing for his life after committing a grave crime. The sword-carrying white ape was truly a resolute demon, and he drew the ancient immortal sword from the scabbard on his back before charging toward one of the green streaks of light. Bai Yuan simply needed the 3 immortal swords from Peace and Tranquility Mountain to falter for a brief moment. However, the old ancestor of Peace and Tranquility Mountain was even more resolute and ruthless, and he surprisingly allowed the 2 ancient immortal swords to collide and destroy each other. A devastating explosion occurred in the sky, yet the old Taoist priest remained determined and unfazed as he continued to control the 2 remaining swords. One sword directly pierced into Bai Yuan, who couldn't avoid the sword in time no matter how he tried to evade it. However, the white ape was ultimately able to prevent the immortal sword from directly piercing through his head, having it pierce through his back instead. The hands of the colossal white ape became mangled and bloody, and he was also pushed further and further back by the might of the immortal sword. In the end, the ancient immortal sword broke free from his grasp and pierced through his heart, with its tip poking out from his back. Bai Yuan was no longer able to maintain his Tao manifestation after suffering 2 severe wounds. After reverting back to his original form, as tall as a human, the white ape drew on all of his power to continue fleeing south. The foundations of his great Tao had been wounded. Before the Tao manifestation of Bai Yuan completely vanished, he smiled wickedly and roared, "Are you not going to save Zhong Kuei? You still have a sliver of a chance if you act now. So what are you going to choose? Are you going to save Zhong Kuei? Or are you going to pursue me? If you pursue me, then that's as good as sentencing Zhong Kuei to death." Ha ha! After the great demon fled for another few hundred kilometers, the 2 ancient immortal swords once again caught up to him and pierced through his body. However, the ancient immortal swords also revealed their true appearance because they were too far away from Peace and Tranquility Mountain at this moment. The old Taoist priest heaved a soft sigh. He had initially planned to forcefully move the so-called Tao manifestation of Peace and Tranquility Mountain several hundred kilometers forward, even if it meant altering and weakening the fortunes of Peace and Tranquility Mountain. This would allow the 2 surviving ancient immortal swords of Peace and Tranquility Mountain to maintain their might. If he did this, however, then the noble scholar lying in a pool of blood beside the well prison would truly lose even that last sliver of a chance at survival. After all, the old Taoist priest's physical body had remained in the same spot and helped Zhong Kuei to gather his remnant soul when he had summoned the golden Tao manifestation just then. The old ancestor of Peace and Tranquility Mountain was attempting to reverse destiny and bring Zhong Kuei back to life. This was a heaven-defying act, one that would elicit incandescent fury from the underworld. Thus, if the fortune of Peace and Tranquility Mountain was weakened, it was entirely possible that the underworld would seize this opportunity to sneak in and directly snatch away the last few wisps of Zhong Kuei's remnant soul. It was because of this that the vile demonic beast claimed there could only be one of 2 options, either to save Zhong Kuei or to pursue him. Perhaps it was also part of Bai Yuan's plans to not comprehensively shatter Zhong Kuei's soul. Close to the well prison, an unsteadily swaying Yin soul appeared in front of the old Taoist priest. It was none other than Zhong Kuei, the deathly pale noble scholar in azure. "Peace and Tranquility Mountain is to blame for this, Mr. Zhong. I'm too ashamed to face Great Subduing Academy," the old Taoist priest said in a solemn voice. As an old Taoist priest at the immortal tier, the old ancestor of Peace and Tranquility Mountain was an immortal who stood in the clouds at the highest peak of the mountain, regardless of whether it was in the context of his sect or the entire Parasol Leaf continent. Thus, it was a huge acknowledgement and recognition for him to refer to the young noble scholar as Mr. Zhong. However, Zhong Kuei had already died, and only a feeble wisp of his Yin soul remained in the world, a wisp that might vanish into heaven and earth at any moment. That being the case, what use was this acknowledgement? At any rate, the words and actions of this old ancestor of Peace and Tranquility Mountain reflected his status as a spiritual master of the Taoist sect. Zhong Kuei's Yin soul smiled faintly and shook its head. His lips moved slightly, yet his voice didn't travel into majestic world. Even so, the old Taoist priest was naturally able to decipher his words. "There's no need to feel guilty, old spiritual master. I was destined to face this tribulation, and it wasn't something that I could flee from. If I didn't face the tribulation in Peace and Tranquility Mountain, then I would have faced it in Great Subduing Academy or elsewhere in Parasol Leaf continent." A young Taoist nun appeared next to the well prison. Her lips were tightly pursed, and there was a trickle of blood seeping out from the corner of her mouth. She was none other than Huang Ting, that Taoist nun who should have remained in the lotus flower-blessed land for another 60 years. Of course, one could also refer to her as Mirror Heart Hall's Fan Wanner or Tong Qingqing. She was more furious than anyone else in the entire Peace and Tranquility Mountain. That sword-carrying white ape had once been a fated opportunity on her path of cultivation, teaching her a sword-carrying technique that wasn't recorded in the scriptures of the sect. Huang Ting had committed this technique to memory, and she had even brought it with her to the lotus flower-blessed land. It was because of this that a popular saying had appeared in the cultivation world of the Blessed Land. There are two Fan Waners in the world, one who carries a sword and one who doesn't. The old ape had brought her into the depths of the well prison many times, allowing her to temper her sword heart and advance her cultivation. Huang Ting wanted to personally capture and kill that white ape. She wanted to ask him whether he regretted betraying Peace and Tranquility Mountain. As for why he had done it, Huang Ting wouldn't ask this. She wasn't willing to ask this. A gigantic black whirlpool appeared above the peak of Peace and Tranquility Mountain following Zhong Kuei's death. Inside this black whirlpool, one could see the vague outline of a giant figure wearing the crown of an emperor and coldly peering down at Peace and Tranquility Mountain. Zhong Kuei's soul looked up and smiled tragically. The old Taoist priest had initially wanted to retract his Golden Tao manifestation, yet upon seeing this black whirlpool, his Golden Tao manifestation bent its knees slightly before immediately leaping into the sky, using its fists to shatter the black whirlpool. However, the old Taoist priest's Golden Tao manifestation also crumbled because of this. This was an unimaginably huge price to pay. Zhong Kuei was just about to say something. However, the old Taoist priest waved his hand and said with a carefree smile, "When it comes to cultivation base and whatnot aren't worth squat. At the end of the day, the most important thing is keeping yourself satisfied." After saying this, the old Taoist priest's expression became slightly forlorn. To say nothing of Mr. Zhong's status as a quasi-sage and his profound potential to become the mountain master of a Confucian school, just his noble personality and demeanor as a person alone were admirable, and made him not deserving of such an early death. Huang Ting turned around and spat out a mouthful of blood before saying to the old Taoist priest, "Old ancestor, I'm going to leave the mountains to hunt him." The old Taoist priest nodded and replied, "Huang Ting, you're not allowed to return to Peace and Tranquility Mountain unless Bai Yuan is killed. Either you return with his head or you die trying to kill him. You can borrow the two mountain protection ancient swords for 60 years. Afterward, you'll have to rely on your own abilities to hunt that white ape." Peace and Tranquility Mountain's Huang Ting accepts old ancestor's command. Huang Ting said in a solemn voice. The young Taoist nun transformed into a streak of light as she dashed toward the south. The old ancestor of Peace and Tranquility Mountain wasn't a great or articulate speaker, and he was also feeling an extremely deep sense of guilt at this moment. Thus he quickly fell silent. Zhong Kuei also felt a sense of guilt in the depths of his heart. A look of surprise suddenly appeared in the old Taoist priest's eyes. He saw two wisps of refreshing wind slowly flow toward Zhong Kuei from near the well prison, lingering around the surroundings. Not only that, but a small and crystalline calligraphy brush also materialized in front of Zhong Kuei. This was a projection rather than a physical item. There was also a bright red robe that looked like the garb of an ancient official, and this robe slowly fluttered down from the place where the black whirlpool had dissipated. Zhong Kuei looked at the wind and snow all and hesitated for a brief moment before gently grabbing it with his hand. The bright red official garb landed on Zhong Kuei. The two wisps of autumn wind rushed into his large sleeves. At the bottom of the well prison, the restless demons and fiends who had been baying for blood a moment ago suddenly became as obedient as dogs. Not only did they retreat back into the well prison, but they suddenly and involuntarily stumbled back in retreat as well, all the way until there was nowhere else to retreat. Zhong Kuei recalled that prophecy about him. No longer a scholar in azure, the soul of Zhong Kuei was now dressed in red garb as he murmured, "The myriad ghosts in the world have nothing to fear if Zhong Kuei doesn't leave the mountains." He turned to the well prison and said, "Go ahead and kowtow." The sound of countless heads thumping against the ground reverberated around the well prison. The old Taoist priest stroked his beard and smiled. By the looks of it, he hadn't fallen from the immortal tier to the unpolished jade tier for nothing. Zhong Kuei fell silent for a long while as if he were contemplating something. In the end he opened his mouth and said, "Old spiritual master, I have one request I want to make." The old Taoist priest nodded and replied, "I'm happy to satisfy your request as long as you're not asking me to kowtow to you." Zhong Kuei couldn't help but chuckle in speechlessness. In the end he bowed in respect and remarked, "I may be a ghost now, but Peace and Tranquility Mountain has a genuine spiritual master." The old Taoist priest was slightly surprised. However, he quickly broke into hearty laughter and replied, "Such satisfying words of flattery. Later that night, Chen Ping'an suddenly felt agitated for no apparent reason. That being the case, he left his room and walked to the garden of the relay station to practice his sword techniques. However, he was unable to calm himself down no matter what. He suddenly raised his head. An imperceptible ripple appeared in the distance. Chen Ping'an retreated several steps, and 1st and 15th rapidly flew out from his sword-nurturing gourd. However, Chen Ping'an quickly breathed a sigh of relief. As it turned out, it was noble scholar Zhong Kuei, now dressed in strange red robes, as well as an elderly and gray-haired Taoist priest. The old Taoist priest glanced at Chen Ping'an, smiling and greeting him with a nod. He then turned to Zhong Kuei and said in a soft voice, "I'll let the two of you chat. After you finish chatting, remember to give me a heads up. I need to bring you away as soon as possible. You can't stay in the mortal world for too long in your current state." Chen Ping'an was immediately struck by a sense of anxiety. Zhong Kuei smiled and said, "Don't ask any questions yet. Allow me to eloquently recount the events to you." While roughly explaining the conflict that had occurred in Peace and Tranquility Mountain, Zhong Kuei spoke as if he were an outsider who was completely uninvolved in the situation. His narration wasn't thrilling, and he recounted the events in the most boring manner possible. Moreover, there was a wide smile on his face as he explained how he had lost to the great demon due to his inferior skills. In the end, the white ape had killed him with 2 sword strikes and 1 hand strike, transforming him into a wandering soul. Because of this, he could no longer keep his position as a noble scholar of a Confucian academy. He regarded this as eloquently recounting the events? "That's it? You died just like that?" Chen Ping'an fumed. He pointed at Zhong Kuei's face and exclaimed, "You died and became a ghost just like that? Aren't you a noble scholar from a Confucian academy? Aren't you able to release your yin soul and your yang soul?" In the end, Chen Ping'an's voice started to trail off, with his expression also becoming slightly dazed as he asked in a soft voice, "How could you die?" After murmuring this question, Chen Ping'an was already unable to say anything else. As if he were riding a galloping horse and looking at lights, many past events flashed through his mind. In the end, his mind settled on a single scene. There was an unrestrained person squatting on top of Burial River, and tugging at a female ghost's hair simply because he thought she was pretty and wanted to have a look at her. Why were so many of the people important to him dead? Chen Ping'an subconsciously grabbed his sword-nurturing gourd. Upon noticing this, however, he quietly retied it to his waist. The wind and snow all hovered in front of Zhong Kuei, and it was clear that it had now become one with Zhong Kuei's yin soul. "Chen Ping'an, let me say this first," Zhong Kuei said in a careful voice. "I genuinely wasn't trying to scam you out of this wind and snow all. However, feel free to scold or hit me as you see fit." The words of a noble person. "What comes after this?" Chen Ping'an asked. "A promise that must be kept?" Zhong Kuei replied in a guilty voice. Chen Ping'an walked over to sit on the stone stool beside the stone table. Zhong Kuei scratched his head and sat down beside the young boy. "But you've died anyway, and you're also no longer a noble scholar," Chen Ping'an said. Zhong Kuei felt increasingly uneasy. Chen Ping'an looked up at Zhong Kuei and said slowly, "However, I'll definitely keep my promises to other people. I'll keep my promises to Mr. Qi, and I'll also keep my promises to you." Zhong Kuei was slightly befuddled. The rims of Chen Ping'an's eyes became red as he continued. "I said that I would let you borrow the wind and snow all. Borrowing it for 1 year is borrowing, and borrowing it for 100 years or 1,000 years is also borrowing." Zhong Kuei remained silent. In the end, Chen Ping'an asked, "If 1,000 years isn't enough, is 10,000 years enough?" He stood up, upon which Chen Ping'an also stood up. A dazzling smile reappeared on Zhong Kuei's face as he exclaimed, "I'm Zhong Kuei, a ghost from Parasol Leaf Continent. I have a friend called Chen Ping'an." Chen Ping'an shot a glare at him before smiling and saying, "I'm Chen Ping'an, a swordsman from Eastern Treasured Vile Continent. I'm acquainted with a righteous noble scholar called Zhong Kuei." The old ancestor from Peace and Tranquility Mountain stroked his beard and nodded. Maybe in 100 or 1,000 years, their encounter in the relay station will become a beautiful story praised and talked about by everyone. After Zhong Kuei left the relay station, The old Taoist priest placed him inside a piece of aged locust wood that looked much like a gavel. When after doing this, the old ancestor of Peace and Prosperity Mountain suddenly turned around, using a land-shortening technique and arriving in Qian Pingin's courtyard in a single step. Qian Pingin, who was still dazed and yet to completely return to his senses, hurriedly stood up and bowed, cupping his fists in respect and saying, "Qian Pingin pays his respects to old esteemed immortal." Zhong Kuei had recounted his death in a calm and casual manner just then, but he hadn't concealed his close relationship with the old Taoist priest from Peace and Tranquility Mountain. The old Taoist priest waved his hand 2 times and said, "There's no need to pay respects." After straightening his back, Qian Pingin asked, "Since you came back, is there perhaps something that you need from me?" The old Taoist priest glanced at Qian Pingin before nodding and remarking, "Being able to maintain self-control is the quality of a truly outstanding person. No wonder Huang Ting and Zhong Kuei are both impressed by you." Qian Pingin didn't understand this remark, but he didn't ask any questions either. The old Taoist priest was in a fairly good mood, so he smiled and asked, "You called yourself a swordsman, so where is your sword?" He simply ignored the existence of 1st and 15th, even though he had seen them flying. "If I had known this earlier, I wouldn't have spent so much time and effort competing with other people in terms of divination," the old Taoist priest murmured to himself. "Not only did I lose, but I even lost the opportunity to observe your experiences in the lotus flower-blessed land." The old Taoist priest was tall and sturdy, and he was wearing a white Taoist robe as well as a hibiscus hat, a hat that represented one of the 3 Taoist branches. He also had gray hair and a gray beard, and this made him appear extremely ethereal and transcendent. Qian Pingin didn't know how to respond, so in the end, he chose to remain silent. There was no need to act smart in front of such a wise and sharp-eyed immortal. Indeed, trying to dress oneself up would be the same as an old woman caking her face with makeup, or a little child pulling on official garb. It would be nothing more than a joke. "I can lend you a sword and we can discuss how long you can keep it for, whether it's 60 years, 100 years, or something else," the old Taoist priest suddenly suggested. "You can offer an immortal treasure in exchange, or you can also pay using grain rain coins." Qian Pingin hesitated for a moment before eventually shaking his head and replying, "Thank you for your kind offer, old esteemed immortal. However, I actually have a sword already." Then his face flushed slightly red with embarrassment. "In any case, I don't have a single grain rain coin on me right now." The old Taoist priest didn't insist upon this. The reason he had suddenly thought about lending a sword to Qian Pingin was because he genuinely appreciated the promise of 10,000 years between the young boy and Zhong Kuei. Beyond that, there was also a deeper sense of selfish goodwill. However, the old ancestor of Peace and Tranquility Mountain had immediately felt regret after making this offer. It was best not to hasten his development and detrimentally affect his growth. The calamity that had befallen Planchette Writing Sect made the old Taoist priest feel slightly anxious. As for why he had returned to the small courtyard, it was because he had noticed the peculiar fluctuations in the mind's realm of Qian Pingin. It appeared that Zhong Kuei's death had a huge effect on the young boy's mental state. Upon closer inspection, however, the old Taoist priest was able to feel at ease again. Cultivators were afraid of their minds becoming small boats that aimlessly drifted with the current. The old Taoist priest was of the opinion that those who allowed chaos and disorder in their mind's realm weren't even worthy of discussing such fears and taboos. In fact, such people shouldn't cultivate at all. If such people cultivated Tao and were fortunate enough to advance to a high cultivation tier, yet their purpose was impure and simply for the sake of snatching fated opportunities and immortal treasure, flaunting their abilities and humiliating other people, and so on, then what was the point of cultivation? What good could these people do? However, regardless of how much the old Taoist priest detested these cultivators who only cultivated their strength but not their mind, he could only guard and influence the territory of Peace and Tranquility Mountain. He could only try his best to ensure that the culture and tradition of this sect remained upright and proper. Qian Pingin mustered up his courage and asked, "Old esteemed immortal, can I ask if you have any mountain protection formations?" The old Taoist priest nodded and replied, "Peace and Tranquility Mountain has 2 mountain protection formations. The core of one formation is the Radiant Moon Mirror, a mirror that can shine light upon all demons and sinister beings in the world, giving them no chance to escape. Under the radiance of the mirror, they will suffer a temporary drop in cultivation. Of course, the effective distance of this formation depends on the cultivation of the person channeling it. Once the radiant moon formation is activated, it's time for the four-sword formation to shine. The four ancient swords are replicas of four powerful immortal swords from the ancient past, and each replica sword can be regarded as a pseudo-celestial tool. Once they come together to form the four-sword formation, their combination can then be regarded as a proper celestial tool. An attack launched by this formation can cover several thousand kilometers in the blink of an eye. If that detestable old beast hadn't refined one of the swords, then I would have been able to kill him right from the very beginning. I could have killed him even if he fled several thousand kilometers more. That detestable old beast might have escaped death. But the immortal tier is also split into two levels. He's only just advanced to the 12th tier, so his cultivation base is still yet to stabilize. Not only that, but he'll also be suppressed by the regulations of this world. His bonded item has been destroyed as well, and his true body has further suffered several wounds from the ancient swords, leading to his soul becoming injured as well. In other words, that detestable old beast is no longer a threat that's worth mentioning. The old Taoist priest was brimming with killing intent as he mentioned by Yuan, the sword-carrying white ape. His vast spiritual energy almost became tangible, forming a hazy white mist around him that appeared like numerous streams of flowing water. The old Taoist priest reined back his emotions, causing the peculiar phenomenon to instantly vanish. In reality, this peculiar phenomenon was a side effect caused by his drop in cultivation base. The most troublesome thing is that the detestable old beast suddenly tunneled into the ground and disappeared along that ancient and severely damaged dragon vein. He most likely had this escape route planned out beforehand. The old Taoist priest pointed above his head and said, I fought with the detestable old beast just then, and I also forced a powerful entity from the underworld to retreat afterward. A Confucian sage who's responsible for overseeing the sky above Parasol Leaf Continent naturally witnessed these events. He descended to Peace and Tranquility Mountain, and he was enraged to learn that Zhong Kuei had been killed. He left to pursue that white ape, yet the detestable old beast surprisingly tunneled into the ground and hid itself. Right now, our only hope is to see whether Huang Ting, who has some karmic ties with the white ape, is able to discover some clues. As long as we find him, that Confucian sage who's one of 72 sages accompanying the paramount sage in the Confucian temples will be able to kill that detestable old beast with a single strike. He's already made the necessary preparations, and the situation won't change even if Huang Ting is killed in battle. Chen Ping'an wanted to say something, but he didn't know where to start. The old Taoist priest smiled and added, This is the worst-case scenario. That girl Huang Ting has always enjoyed good fortune. She also tempered her mind and character in the lotus flower-blessed land, and she has the protection of the two ancient swords as well. As such, hunting down by Yuan might be a fated opportunity for her, one which can allow her to break through to the next cultivation tier. Chen Ping'an nodded in understanding. There was an amused smile on the old Taoist priest's face as he continued. I initially thought that Huang Ting would grumble and complain for half a day after I forcefully dragged her out from the lotus flower-blessed land. However, she surprisingly didn't complain at all. While returning to Peace and Tranquility Mountain, she mentioned you many times and also said that she would definitely visit the Greatly Empire's Dragon Spring Prefecture to look for you in the future. The old Taoist priest gently flicked his sleeve and remarked, How very strange. I'm not a talkative person. Yet I've already said more tonight than I have in the past few decades combined. Back to the topic at hand, the mountain protection formations of Peace and Tranquility Mountain are extremely powerful and have a very profound history. They possess both offensive and defensive capabilities, and they can rival the formations of many sects in Middle-earth Divine Continent. However, it won't be right for me to privately teach you how to refine and channel these formations, especially since this pertains to the fortunes of Peace and Tranquility Mountain. That being the case, I also possess a mountain protection formation that I obtained from the secret abode of an ancient immortal. This formation possesses immense destructive power, and it is a formation that I can sell to you. The disadvantage of this formation is that it consumes far too much silver. Channeling this formation will also consume the fortunes of the mountains and rivers. If Huang Ting ever decides to found her own force somewhere in Parasol Leaf Continent, or if she decides to marry someone and become Dao partners with them in the future. I initially considered giving this formation to her as a congratulatory present. If this isn't enough, then I might even have to dip into my other savings. Chen Ping'an gulped upon hearing this. He wasn't worried about Huang Ting's dowry or the old Taoist priest's savings, and was instead worried about the remark that this formation would consume far too much silver. The old Taoist priest noticed the hesitation in Chen Ping'an's eyes, so he roared with hearty laughter and teased. Such meticulous calculations and planning. I like it. Before Chen Ping'an could make heads or tails of the situation, the old Taoist priest had already moved on from the topic of mountain protection formations, warning in a quiet voice. Chen Ping'an, even though I don't know what treasure you're carrying with you, a treasure that can conceal your aura and prevent others from divining your location and fortune is an incredibly valuable one. You should definitely cherish it. Such treasures are priceless and incredibly difficult to obtain. And there's only one such treasure in the entire Peace and Tranquility Mountain. Moreover, it was a treasure left behind by the founder. Chen Ping'an recalled the unremarkable oil paper umbrella, and he nodded solemnly in response. The old Taoist priest felt a great sense of satisfaction looking at Chen Ping'an. There were few young people whom the old ancestor of Peace and Tranquility Mountain acknowledged and viewed as worthy. Among them were Taoist nun Huang Ting and noble scholar Zhong Kuei. And now there was also Chen Ping'an. Regardless of whether it was the secluded parasol leaf continent in the southeast or the vast majestic world, the old Taoist priest felt like there could never be enough young people. No matter how chaotic the world became, there would always be pillars to hold it up. In order to prevent Zhong Kuei's Yin soul from being taken to the underworld by that Yin entity before, the old Taoist priest had chosen to sacrifice his cultivation base and drop a tear. He had made this decision despite being clearly aware of the consequences. He could no longer address the biggest regret in his life. After advancing to the immortal tier, the old ancestor of Peace and Tranquility Mountain had been granted the title of Observing Mystical Heavenly Lord by the Taoist branch that he belonged to. He had enjoyed a transcendent standing. Looking back at history, a Taoist priest would have the opportunity to meet their branch master and have their Taoist robes, Taoist hat, and an identity token personally handed to them by the branch master when they were promoted from the position of True Lord to Heavenly Lord. This was the case regardless of which of the three branches of Taoism they belonged to, and regardless of whether they were in Majestic World overseen by the Confucian sect or Heavenly World overseen by the Taoist sect. However, as the newest Heavenly Lord of his Taoist branch, the observing mystical Heavenly Lord hadn't seen his branch master leave the White Jade capital and descend into Majestic World. The old Heavenly Lord hadn't dared to speculate, yet the others in Peace and Tranquility Mountain had all mulled over this for a long time. Because of this, the sect leader of Peace and Tranquility Mountain had specially traveled to the Confucian Academy located in the northernmost region of Parasol Leaf Continent, inquiring about this matter and asking whether a Confucian sage had interfered in the process. Perhaps this was the reason why their branch master hadn't traveled to Majestic World to meet the new Heavenly Lord. The mountain master of the Confucian Academy was a straightforward person who hadn't wanted to go in circles with the sect leader of Peace and Tranquility Mountain. Thus, he had smiled and countered with a question, saying that perhaps the branch masters of the two other Taoist branches would face such special treatment. Yet what kind of relationship existed between their branch master and the Confucian sect? Who would obstruct their branch master from entering Majestic World? The old Heavenly Lord had felt increasingly dispirited after hearing this reply. After mulling over it for a long time, he could only conclude that his great Tao was too shallow even though his cultivation base was very high. Thus, his branch master was purposely giving him a warning. Before the battle in Peace and Tranquility Mountain, the observing mystical Heavenly Lord had thought that he could eventually meet the branch master when he advanced to the Ascension tier in the future. Now, however, this was nothing more than a pipe dream. He didn't regret his decision, yet it was impossible not to feel disappointed. The old Taoist priest was just about to leave when Chen Ping'an suddenly said, "Thank you, old spiritual master." The old Taoist priest smiled and asked, "Why are you thanking me? Is it because I sacrificed my cultivation base for Zhong Kuei?" He shook his head. "There's no need to thank me. It's Peace and Tranquility Mountain that owes Zhong Kuei. Thank you, old spiritual master, and thank you, Peace and Tranquility Mountain, for allowing me to understand that there are also gallant and kind-hearted immortals in the mountains." Chan Ping'an replied in a solemn voice. This instantly put the old Taoist priest in a delightful mood. Oh, so that's how it is, huh? Who would have thought that you're quite similar to Zhong Kuei? You're also very good at flattery, aren't you? I'm speaking from the bottom of my heart, Chan Ping'an replied in a helpless voice. The old Taoist priest looked at him with a smile and remarked, Sincere words of flattery are the most soothing. He then flew away on the wind,